Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and I'd like to welcome you tonight to the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. We're sorry about the air conditioning tonight. They've been notified to turn it on, so it'll probably cool down here about the time we're about to leave. So if you want to take off your jackets, I certainly can understand, gentlemen. I'd like to begin with the roll call, and I'll begin with Commissioner Strickman.
Here.
Commissioner Spranker.
Here.
Commissioner Loper.
Here.
Commissioner Hutchinson. He will not be here tonight. Commissioner Lewis.
Here.
Commissioner Nelson.
Here.
And I'd like to announce that we do have a new alternate member, Commissioner Olutsky, and he's not in attendance tonight. I'll begin with the opening statement. The commission is comprised of Peoria citizens who have been appointed by the City Council to serve on the commission as a civic responsibility without compensation. Our duty is to study and review issues within the City of Peoria and then forward our recommendations to the City Council. All hearings are conducted in accordance with the rules of procedure and the Roberts Rules of Order. Each case will be called in order in which it appears on the agenda unless otherwise announced during the meeting. In the interest of maintaining a fair and efficient hearing, the Commission adheres to the following steps. The Chairman will call the case, staff gives a brief report and recommendation, applicant gives a presentation, opposition and support gives testimony. It's generally limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Applicant may make a rebuttal, and the commissioner then discussion and decision. Anyone wishing to speak must present a speaker's request form and hand it to the planning assistant at the far end of this table. Please be as brief as possible and do not repeat statements made by others. Anyone wishing to protest the decision of the commission public hearing item must request a second public hearing before the City Council. The request must be submitted in writing to the Community Development Department within 7 days after the commission hearing. All commission recommendations on public hearing items move forward to the regular City Council meeting. The City Council then acts on the recommendation of the commission. They may concur with the decision, modify it, or overturn it. We welcome citizens' comments, and as fellow citizens of Peoria, we thank you in advance for your participation. And we are thrilled to see so many people in the audience tonight, so thank you for coming. We often sit here alone, so thank you. This is the last call to submit your speaker's request form, and then I'll move on to the consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are routine in nature, and tonight they consist of 6 items. I do have a speaker's request form for 3C public hearing, conditional use permit, AT&T tag trilogy. So I'd like to move that to the regular, the new business. Can I do that?
Madam Chair, somebody would need to make a motion to consider the consent agenda with the exception of that item, and then move it to the regular.
So I need a motion and a second, and then a vote?
Correct.
Okay, fine. Yes.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented with the exception of item CU 140008.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you. Could I please have a vote? Oh, mine's not set up for voting. Oh. Okay. Okay, everyone, please vote. Doesn't appear to be working. Could we just take a show of hands?
We should do a roll call vote then.
A roll call, okay? I'll do a quick roll call. Commissioner Loper? Yes. Commissioner Nelson?
Yes?
Commissioner Spranker?
Yes.
Commissioner Strickman?
Yes.
Commissioner Lewis?
Yes.
And Commissioner Golden, yes. So item C3, CU 14-0008 will become a regular agenda item under new business. Thank you. Now to move on to the consent agenda. There are now 5 items on the consent agenda. The first one, 1C, decision. What? No, what you approved was. I'm sorry.
I believe the chair just referred to the consent agenda when she meant regular agenda, so you're now moving on to the regular agenda, and the first item will be 3C, which had been on the consent agenda.
We were asking for item C3 to be removed from the consent agenda into the regular agenda.
Actually, the vote that you just took
Right.
approved the consent agenda without 3C on it. That's all you needed
Oh,
to
I'm
do.
sorry.
Yeah, you
And
didn't
so I
need the
don't need to
separate
read the
vote.
items?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, we'll move on. Thank you. Now we'll move on to new business. And the first order of business tonight is 7R, a public hearing. Oh, I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, it's 3C. That was the one that we removed from the consent, so that's the first
you're right.
item.
I'm sorry, thank you. The first item will be C3, 3C, and this is a public hearing, conditional use permit, AT&T tag Trilogy, that's CU 14-0008, discussion and possible action to consider request for conditional use permit to allow a wireless communication facility in the form of a 35-foot Fox sequoia cacti and associated ground-mounted equipment. The property is located at the northwest corner of Wisconsin Boulevard and Trilogy Boulevard Town Center. Is the staff to make a report?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. As stated, the item before you is a conditional use permit for AT&T Tag Trilogy. Just to clarify on the proposal, the initial proposal did include 3 faux saguaros. The proposal as it currently stands is for 2 faux saguaro cacti for a wireless communication facility, in addition to an equipment enclosure and additional landscape material. As stated, this project is located west of the intersection of Trilogy Boulevard and Vistancia Boulevard. It is located at the entrance to the Trilogy Golf Course at Vistancia. In addition to the faux saguaros, which will contain the cell equipment, there will also be 3 live saguaros as well as shrubs added to the site. The 2 views in front of you demonstrate and illustrate the project site, both with a little bit of perspective as well as a close-up on the right to show you the area in question where the equipment would be added. This is an existing landscape area at the entrance, as I mentioned, to the Trilogy Golf Course. The existing entrance includes wall structures, plant material, as well as water features. Located to the south of the oval site where the equipment will be added, you can see an existing golf cart trail, as well as on the right-hand side, Trilogy Boulevard as it enters the facility. This image illustrates the current entrance as viewed from Vistancia Boulevard. As you can see, there is considerable height to the existing entry feature, as well as the existing trees and other landscape material. The applicant has provided photo simulations to illustrate what the facility would look like as installed. The first view you see is looking to the east, southeast, from the golf course. The picture on the upper left is the existing view shed. The proposed view will include both the faux saguaro equipment as well as the live saguaros that would be added. You can see there's minimal change in the surroundings, and the proposed facility blends in quite well with the surroundings as they exist. In another view, as you can see from the existing golf cart path south of the proposed site, you can see both of you in the foreground of the proposed live cactus, as well as to the left, one of the faux saguaros. In context, the faux saguaros will blend in quite well once the live saguaros are added. The height of the faux saguaros is approximately 35 feet, and the live saguaros will be a minimum of 25 feet. The third photo simulation shows a view looking west-southwest from Vistancia Boulevard. This is, again, kind of taken from the road looking into the entrance area, and as you can see, there's a very minimal change in the appearance of the site. The existing trees and other landscape elements really provide a great setting for this facility. The conceptual elevations, once again, illustrate the features that will be added to the site with this proposal. As you can see, the wireless communication tower, or in the form of the saguaros, as well as the CMU block wall, which will enclose the equipment. The wall will be painted in a tan color to blend with the surroundings and will conceal all equipment fully. So all of the ground-mounted equipment will be enclosed within this screen wall. Additionally, the views of the elevations from the north as well as the west. Again, as you can see, everything blends in quite well. We believe that in general this facility is very appropriate to the setting that exists. In a discussion of the compatibility of this facility, we found that the golf course setting and the surrounding context, it is an appropriate use. As I noted, the existing landscape area and vegetation provides an ideal location for the faux saguaro facility. The addition of the live saguaros will enhance the setting further and create a balance between the cell facilities in the area. And again, the entrance wall feature that exists, as well as the site contouring, creates additional screening from the roadway. So in essence, those on Vistancia Boulevard would have very little view of any change from the site. The applicant has also identified that there are no alternative sites for co-location on existing wireless facilities within 1 mile radius of the site. Essentially, there are not any other wireless facilities that they could place additional antennas on within a 1 mile radius. That's what the city will request information on to see if there are opportunities to avoid the need for an additional vertical structure. In this case, there's not an alternative that they could co-locate on. As a result, the key findings of our analysis are that the proposed wireless communication facility meets all of the CUP criteria. The proposal is consistent with the intent of the ordinance by minimizing visual impacts through the use of the camouflage structure as well as the concealed wall that blends with the setting. And lastly, the proposal does not result in any detrimental impacts to the surrounding neighborhood. As a result, it's staff's recommendation to approve case CU 14-0008, subject to the conditions of approval as stated in the staff report. And with that, I'd take any questions.
Thank you. Do any of the commissioners have questions? Then I'd like to open the public hearing, and I have one speaker request form, and that's Sam Paparazzo. Thank you. And when you come to the podium, would you state your name for the record and your address?
Sam Paparazzo, 30764 North 126th Drive, on a residential property in Estancia. I first came to learn about this hearing and the proposed project by reading about it in the October 24th issue of the Peoria Times newspaper under the city notice section. Shortly thereafter, I expressed a concern to the Mesquite City Council member Toma about the project. Councilmember Toma assisted me in obtaining a copy of the proposal and the architect's drawings that were presented here this evening. I also received assistance from Melissa Segment, I hope I said that correctly, culminating in her making arrangements for me to review the entire case file yesterday afternoon. And I'd just like to share 3 of my takeaways from reading over the case file with the members of the board, just for a moment, if I could. Let me be easier if I just read this. The first takeaway was upon review of the AT&T indoor signal strength maps without and with the proposed X165 communication equipment, while there is an indicated 1 to 2 level increase in indoor signal strength provided to the immediate radius area of the proposed equipment, it appears that the proposed equipment provides for a greater benefit to the land use area south of Loop 303 and east of Lake Pleasant Parkway, where some of the area apparently would move from no or limited indoor signal to an acceptable indoor signal. This appears to be in line with what Mr. DeClane Murphy with Coal Creek Consulting stated in his April 8th, 2014 narrative document submitted to the city, which states the proposed project is, quote, needed to correct an existing coverage gap within the existing mobility network, unquote. Second, also appearing in the April 8th narrative document is the following stated in the section heading titled Community Outreach Efforts. It goes on to say AT&T has complied with any neighborhood outreach necessary. AT&T is available to discuss or meet with any neighbor or neighborhood group in an effort to keep neighbors informed throughout the planning application process. Upon previously inquiring if Tower Asset Group and/or the Trilogy HOA had conducted a homeowners meeting regarding the proposed project, Ms. Segman advised that no neighborhood meeting is required for the city process. Also, I made an email request on Tuesday to Mr. Murphy with Coal Creek Consulting regarding an answer to my question about a previously conducted homeowners meeting. Mr. Murphy deferred an answer to Mr. Messing with Tower Asset Group, advising that he should be following up with me on Tuesday. Having not received a response from Mr. Messing, on Wednesday I sent an email request to Mr. Messing asking the following. Did AT&T TAG and/or the Trilogy Developer-controlled Board of Directors conduct a proposed project announcement Q&As meeting with the Trilogy Residential Property HOA members? Also, were the Trilogy Residential Property HOA members given the opportunity to vote yes or no on the project? If a meeting was conducted with the Trilogy Residential Property HOA members, would you forward the meeting summary document as recorded that day? To date, I have not received a response back from Mr. Messing. However, late this afternoon, upon making one last request to Mr. Murphy, he replied as follows. I've only been involved with the proposed AT&T TAG Trilogy site since late last year, but I know this site has been in process since 2011. I don't have specifics on what meetings were held during this period, but Andrew Messing, TAG, did confirm that Shea Homes did consult with homeowners in Trilogy, and the proposed AT&T site has been a topic of discussion at multiple meetings since 2011. Hope this helps. I'd just like to comment, I've owned a residential property in Vistancia since December of 2009. I regularly attend the quarterly board meetings, annual meetings. I read all the correspondence sent from my Vistancia Village A Community Association, and in no time do I recall ever seeing any kind of notification about this project. And then the last observation, contained in the case file is a 12-page document titled Project Information showing an RFDS stamp date of December 17, 2012. Pages 2 and 3 show survey information is conducted by Infinity Engineering Services, Ltd. A particular note is that the survey tracks identified for the proposed project site are showing the owner as Trilogy at Vistancia Community Association. However, the city requested Proposition 207 waiver form is not signed by the members of the Trilogy at Vistancia Community Association, but by Matt Porter, Assistant Secretary for the applicant, Shea Homes Southwest, Inc. So in closing, I believe that the majority of Vistancia residents, if asked why they choose to live in a remote area of the city that requires an extended drive time to and from, they would respond that they choose to do so for the enjoyment of living among the panoramic natural desert beauty that Vistancia has to offer. Therefore, it is my opinion that the placement of the proposed two 35-feet-tall amusement park-type cacti structures will detract from rather than enhance Vistancia's natural desert beauty. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm sorry, do you have a question?
Yeah, a question for the speaker. So do you live near where this is going, or is it just something you drive by?
Yeah, I drive by. And obviously, if you're going to dine at the tap room or to play golf or something, out-of-towners, guests frequenting the area will also be driving by it as well. So.
And you recognize that incomplete cell coverage in an area is not just for convenience sake, but it also is for emergency services and a lot of other things.
Well, and
They
again,
call-
it appears in the Vistancia area, looking at the maps, there is adequate coverage now. As I stated earlier, it looks like looking on the before and after maps were provided by AT&T in the file. It looks like the area that doesn't have coverage now that will be benefiting from the installation of the equipment in Vistancia is miles east of the Vistancia planned development off of the 303 corridor and east of Lake Pleasant Parkway. So you should take a look at those. I don't know if they have those map illustrations to put up on the slides here. There's a before and
That's
after.
okay, but my final comment was the complaints about the HOA being involved or not being involved. You'd realize that that's not a body of the city. We don't control what the HOA
No,
does or doesn't
No,
do.
obviously, and I'm just giving you my takeaway. But, you know, the comment made by the consulting firm is that they have outreach there, and the project's been going since 2011. My comment is, the first time I heard about this project was a few weeks ago in the city notice section. So, I mean, it sounds good that in their, in the presentation materials they submitted to the city, they're saying they made themselves available. Well, if they did, then at some point, this doesn't only impact the residents of Trilogy, it impacts everyone that resides in Vistancia. So if they were open about it, at least they could say, here's what's being proposed. I shouldn't have to, as a citizen, be reading about it, a couple of weeks before the hearing in, the Vistancia Times
I
newspaper.
think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the notice that he's referring to is part of the typical notice procedure, so that it
No, and
went
I'm not
exactly the way it's
arguing the
supposed
point about the city's process. What I'm saying is the applicant, the consulting firm for the applicant stated that this project's been in place since 2011, and they've complied with efforts to make this known to neighbors and neighborhoods within the Vistancia community. And I'm saying I didn't hear about it till I read about it 2 weeks ago in the newspaper. So,
to. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. And I apologize, I didn't ask if the applicant was present. Thank you. Would you like to speak? And state your name and address for the record.
Will do. Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the board. My name is Declan Murphy, and I'm with a company called Coal Creek Consulting. My address is 1525 North Hayden Road in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'd like to thank staff for all their effort on the application. As I had communicated with Mr. Paparazzo, is that this project has been ongoing since 2011. I only became involved late last year in the project, and at that stage, the only other person that's been involved with the project since the beginning is Mr. Andrew Messing, who's with a company called TAG. What TAG does is they basically facilitate accommodating wireless carriers within communities such as this community of Trilogy, Vistancia, and other communities across the valley. So Andrew has been involved with the project since day one. And so to get the history as to the type of outreach that has taken place to address Mr. Paparazzo, that's who I relied on. And I've no doubt, I've known Andrew for a long time. I've been in this business for 15 years, and I find Andrew to be very credible. And what he's telling me is that Shea Homes had quite an involvement with the process. And so they've basically have reached out to the homeowners and got positive feedback on what's being proposed. And, basically there was a few other locations thrown about as far as, locating these false wires, but ended up with the location that's being proposed now. I haven't received any negative feedback on what's being proposed. To comment on what Mr. Paparazzo said about impact in the community as far as what's been proposed is that the impacts are really positive because people want cell phone coverage. And, it's down to the stage now, and we hear this more common in recent times than we've heard before, but when people look at buying a home, they'll check their cell phone coverage. And, Shea Homes really have nothing to gain by accommodating this facility other than it benefits homeowners, and that's really their motivation in this whole process. So, but also I would like to just say that I reached out to Mr. Paparazzo yesterday. We offered to have a meeting with him, and I offered to sit down or talk with him before tonight's meeting, but he didn't take me up on that offer, and I would have been happy to sit down with him, and I have with me tonight the AT&T RF engineer who can get into more detail on the coverage maps and the technological side of things. But just to say that, you know, this has been a process that's going on since 2011. And believe you me, this is the scenario with monocactus, as we call them, they don't come any better than this from an aesthetic standpoint, because once these saguaros are in place, you'll hardly be able to distinguish these from a real saguaro. So as far as the design and with all the landscaping that's being proposed aesthetically, honestly, when if this site gets constructed, you know, people won't realize that there's a wireless site there. So, you know, I haven't received any negative feedback since we posted the signs, and you know, what's been proposed we feel is as good as we can do as far as we've complied with all the landscaping requirements. Obviously, this type of site, just to say, from an RF or from an AT&T perspective, is quite a compromise, because the cactuses are only 35 foot tall, so whereby your center of your antenna is 29 feet, which is really low and really doesn't have the impact that AT&T would like to have. But needless to say, AT&T wouldn't be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on this site if it wasn't a necessary site. They don't take the approach, let's build it, the customers will come. It's quite the opposite. They're reacting to customers who are complaining, and they have the data on drop calls. And so with that, you know, there's no negative to what's being proposed. And I can assure you that Shea Homes have been well involved in the process and very conscious of how this whole project moved forward, and as far as, you know, consulting with the homeowners, et cetera, et cetera. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions you might have beyond that.
Thank you. Do any of the commissioners have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Spranker?
Mr. Murphy, early on, I forgot the gentleman's name already, but when he was talking about the benefit for the towers were largely to the east of the road and to the south of the site. I'm curious if there are any benefits that would RF or signal-wise for cell phones would benefit Trilogy or Vistanza in total. You said the coverage is good there, but is there any additional coverage benefits or signal strength as a result of these towers going in there?
Madam Chairman, Commissioner Spraker, I guess the term coverage gap can be misleading, and the thing about the coverage maps that we provided is that it doesn't really address the whole picture, because you have, let's say, lack of signal where your phone won't work, and then you have the challenge where you have capacity issues. So you may have an area near, you know, let's say at this intersection where you can make a call at certain times of the day, but let's say at the busy times of the day, you can make a call. So the term coverage gap really doesn't, I mean, the coverage maps we provided don't really tell the true story. They do show where there's signal and where there isn't signal, but there's also that capacity issue, which is becoming more and more of a challenge, because more people are using their phones for data now than probably calling, and it's become the challenge now is to satisfy the data usage, which has really become the challenge. But if you want a more technical explanation, I would be happy to have Oscar address that, you know.
Then let me ask it, rather than talking about signal strength or what have you, will this increase the capacity for those people that live in Vistanza as opposed to just areas south or southeast of that?
It is my understanding, but again, I would defer to Oscar to give you a more in-depth explanation to that, because I'm not an RF engineer. I'm kind of relying on the coverage maps as well, but I do know beyond the coverage map, there's the lack of signal and there's the capacity issue. But if you would like Oscar to address that, you know, we could.
Perhaps he could. One other question,
Sure.
though. Will this facility accommodate only AT&T, or does it accommodate the other cell phone carriers as well?
The way we've designed it right now is that the infrastructure, fiber and power, will be there to accommodate more than AT&T. So we know that T-Mobile has expressed interest in this area in the past. That's something they would take up with TAG and Shea Homes. But for now, we're basically just dealing with the AT&T, which is the two cactuses and the equipment compound. But having said that, if some other carrier does come along, there will be fiber and the power for their equipment will be already, the infrastructure will already be there. So it would make it a kind of a natural area for another carrier to look at if they were trying to do, because you have to understand that that whole area is residential, so you really have you have no co-location options other than new vertical structure, which is always a last effort, because co-location is always the first priority, because it's simply speed to market and the most cost effective. So with an area like this, you know, if another carrier is looking at the area, they're probably going to have to look at a saguaro similar to what we're proposing, because the camouflage options are limited. You know, you have palm trees, pine trees, you have saguaros. Saguaros are about the best looking wireless site that, you know, that any carrier can do. So
To be clear then, right now, we're talking about only AT&T, and if T-Mobile and Sprint or whoever else decides that they need to have coverage in that area, they would have to bring in some more fall antennas dressed up as saguaros or palm trees or something in that same particular geographical defined area. Is that correct?
that's correct, and I would defer to staff, because I assume that they would also have to come in and do a full review of maybe a conditional use permit as well. So it wouldn't be just a case where they decide to add saguaros there and they just go and, you know, construct them. There will be a whole review process for that, I would imagine. So, but I would defer to staff. For that.
Could we have the staff speak? Thank you.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Spraker, that is correct. There would be the requirement for the conditional use permit and site plan. As I mentioned, this was an original proposal for 3 monosaguaros or faux saguaros. So the site has been designed to accommodate a future user. They would need to go through the full process. However, the design is certainly set for that possibility.
Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa, a question then too. Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you.
Would if, let's say T-Mobile came along and they want to put up a couple saguaros in that particular location, do we go back through this whole process again with them?
Commissioner Spraker, that's correct. They would need to go through an entirely separate conditional use permit hearing before the council or commission.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Then I'll close the public hearing. And could I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
first I want to make a comment that I think the stealth technology has come a long ways. I'm thinking of the 75 or 80 foot faux palm tree behind the Walgreens at 99th and Beardsley, or something like that, and you can drive around town, you can see saguaros that are 60 feet that are clearly, I mean, it's improving drastically, and I appreciate the efforts that have gone into this. As you said, it's not cheap to just try to make it blend in. With that, I would move that we approve CU 014, I'm sorry, let me make sure I get the number right. CU 14-0008, subject to the stipulations in the staff report.
Thank you. Could I have a second, please?
I second.
Thank you. Would everyone please vote? Yeah. The motion passes. Thank you. The next item of business tonight is 7R, public hearing, land use element and public administration update, GPA 14-002, city initiated amendment to the general plan to update the land use element and plan administration in an effort to maintain a document that adequately responds to the changing social, economic, and geographic trends and development and pressures which impact the land use, traffic patterns, social economic conditions, and provisions of the city services among others. Could I please have the staff report?
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair and Commissioners, my name is Lori Deaver. I'm with the Planning Department. I am once again in front of you this evening for this case. Let me give you a little bit of project background as a refresher. The case before you this evening is a major amendment to the general plan. Because it is a major amendment, there are specific state requirements that are triggered. Per state statutes, major amendments are subject to an annual process. So the request must be heard in the same calendar year in which the application was submitted. This year, only one application was submitted, and that is the city-initiated request before you this evening. Another state regulation is that cities with a population over 25,000 people are required to have a second commission meeting, 2 different commission meetings at different locations, so that's why we are before you this evening. If you recall, the first public hearing for this request was last month in October, so tonight is the second required hearing. As a refresher, the scope of a major general plan amendment may include map changes, text changes, or both. GP 14-0002 is a city-initiated request to amend only the text within Section 2, Land Use Element, and Section 14, the Plan Administration. No changes to the maps are proposed in this amendment, and primarily the changes being proposed are housekeeping in nature. For the Section 2 Land Use Element, the proposed changes include a reorganization of the content to increase the readability and ease of use, modifications to the land use descriptions to better define the density or intensity associated with each classification, realignment of the text and tables associated with the residential target density, so they're now logical in order, clarification of the intent or function of the general plan land use and zoning table. And the last notable change is an update to the conformity determination criteria. If you recall from the previous discussions, the residential target density is the maximum allowable density for projects meeting the minimum city standards. So for development proposals that exceed the target density or propose another zoning district not listed within that correlation table, they still may be considered appropriate in some cases, but they need to demonstrate a superior quality in design or provide amenities that are above the city minimums. So the general plan currently outlines the criteria in evaluating whether exceeding the target density is commensurate to the overall public benefit. So the staff is proposing to refresh that current list of criteria. For Section 14, the public administration, our proposed modifications include reorganizing of the text to clearly distinguish between the description of the public participation process versus the actual notification requirements. We are updating the deadline for holding a neighborhood meeting to match the timeframes within the zoning ordinance. Staff is proposing changes to the notification requirements for privately initiated versus city-initiated amendments to recognize the differences in the target audience and the scale and impact of those amendments. And lastly, the modifications being proposed to Table 14.3 are intended to eliminate conflicts with the provisions and intent of Section 2. Because this is a major amendment, the methods used to notify the public slightly differ from the typical process. Notice of this amendment was provided in accordance with the regulations of the general plan. Draft copies were made available on the city's website. Draft copies of the text were also made available to adjacent agencies for the review and comment as part of the 60-day review cycle. Staff did receive a letter from ADWR and Arizona State Land Department. Those were minor comments and they were incorporated into the document. We received no comments from school districts, and we received no support or opposition to the proposed amendments. We find that the overall amendments and proposed modifications are an overall improvement to the general plan, and it's not solely for the good or the benefit of a particular landowner or owners, that it improves the usability of the general plan, as noted within the staff report. And this amendment is in conformance with the goals, objectives, and policies of the Peoria General Plan. Staff is recommending, Commission forward a favorable recommendation to Council for case GPA 14-0002. And with that, I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any of the commissioners have any questions? Then I will, do I need to open and close the public meeting? I will open the public meeting. I will close the public meeting. Any other comments? Then could I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair,
Yes?
I would move that we send a favorable recommendation to the City Council for GPA 14-0002 as outlined in the staff report.
Thank you. And could I have a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner, oh, thank you. Would everyone please vote? And it passes. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 8R, which is conditional use permit, Grand Avenue Station, CU 14-0009. Discussion and possible action to consider a request for a conditional use permit to allow the operation of an automotive tire shop and repair facility at the existing building, former gas station. The property is located at the northeast corner of 75th Avenue and Olive at 7410 West Olive Avenue. And could I please have the staff report?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. As stated, the case before you is a conditional use permit to allow an automotive repair facility and tire shop in an existing building located at the northeast corner of 75th Avenue and Olive Avenue. As you can see, the property is also bounded by Grand Avenue. The project size is an approximately 2,980 square foot existing building on a 29,577 square foot lot. So this is an existing building that was formerly occupied by a gas station and convenience store. And as stated, the request is to repurpose that building for use as an automotive repair facility and tire shop. To provide you a little context for the site, the property is zoned C2 intermediate commercial and is surrounded by several commercial uses. There's a vacant lot directly to the north that it also has the C2 zoning. Directly to the east, there is an existing commercial shopping center. To the southeast, as you can see, the property not only is bounded by Olive Avenue frontage road, there's an additional frontage road. There's also the railroad to the southwest of the site, as well as Grand Avenue. So there are a number of existing conditions, very auto-centric. Directly across 75th Avenue to the west is a vacant undeveloped property that is zoned industrial. And to the southwest across both Olive, Grand Avenue, and 75th, there is a vacant commercial property as well. So all of the property immediately adjacent to the site has non-residential uses or zoning. The image on the right illustrates the approximate distance from the existing building to the closest residential units to the north of the site. As I mentioned, there is a vacant commercial property located in the intervening area. This property could be developed with a commercial use currently. The applicant has provided conceptual development plans to indicate the proposed changes to this existing building. The changes are generally minor in nature. The building itself would remain in its current form with a few modifications. The building has sustained graffiti damage and vandalism as it's currently vacant. The applicant's proposing to paint the building in a tan neutral color, as well as to add roll-up doors to allow entrance for the automotive uses. The site plan on the left illustrates the existing building and the existing canopy, which would remain in place. No uses would occur under the canopy. All uses would occur within the existing building. The minor changes to the site would include reorienting of parking spaces and the addition of landscape islands to meet landscape requirements. As noted, the roll-up doors that would be added would be on the south side of the building, most remotely from the existing residential to the north. The two roll-up doors would be recessed per city design standards and would be able to remain closed during operations. As part of the city's citizen participation process for the conditional use permit, both notice of application and notice of hearing were provided to property owners within 600 feet of the site. HOAs within 1 mile radius of the property were also notified. Staff did receive several phone calls in opposition early in the case after the notice of application had been provided. As a result, although written opposition was not received, staff did recommend that a neighborhood meeting was held. The applicant held such a meeting, although not required, September 9, 2014 at the Peoria Main Library. There were 3 property owners in attendance, and a number of items were discussed that evening. The primary concerns focused on conditions the neighborhood is facing today. So these are existing conditions that have impacted the residents. Specifically, traffic using the neighborhoods that are to the north of the property as a turnaround for 75th Avenue. The individuals attending the meeting indicated that there are quite a few turnarounds, essentially creating cut-through traffic or using their neighborhood to make U-turns to head back southbound on 75th Avenue. So this is an existing condition that's occurring without the proposed use in existence. There was also a mention that there are a number of vacant auto facilities within the general vicinity, within Peoria and elsewhere, and there was question as to whether those facilities could be used instead. The city is responding to the application we received, and we do not choose the location that the applicants request. So we are responding to a request to locate in this, the proposed site, as opposed to any other location within the city. There were also a number of general quality of life concern issues that were noted due to crime within the neighborhood, as I mentioned, traffic concerns, or other things that have occurred over time in this neighborhood that the residents were concerned with. In order to address these concerns, while they are not part of this or related to the proposed use that we're hearing tonight, staff did provide several resources, including the traffic management program, which deals with things like providing speed control mechanisms such as speed humps or other ways to moderate neighborhood traffic. In addition, the city does have a number of programs that deal with crime prevention and neighborhood safety. It appeared that most of the concerns that were raised by the neighbors were in response, as I mentioned, to existing conditions. Other items of note were concerns regarding the appearance of the facility, and I'll mention some of the city's regulations and how we ensure that facilities of this nature are appropriate to the area and do not create negative impacts. In terms of the land use compatibility, as I noted, this site was a former gas station and convenience center, a use that's known for generating high traffic volumes and turnover, as well as operations at many hours of the day and evening. In comparison, this use will be considerably less intense and have lower impact, and certainly generate considerably less traffic than the former gas station would have. The applicant, as I mentioned, will be enhancing the appearance of the building and site. In lieu of the existing graffiti, there will be a fresh coat of paint. There will also be additional landscaping on the site, and in general, it will be the reuse of an existing vacant building, which would typically be considered enhancing the neighborhood. The design and operational characteristics of the site have also been designed to ensure the maximum compatibility with this existing building, since the building itself will not be moved. The roll-up doors, as I noted, will be located facing Olive Avenue, away from residential uses. All activities must occur fully inside. There cannot be any repair work or other actions occurring outside of the building itself. In addition, the city does not permit outdoor storage or the outdoor parking of vehicles waiting to be serviced. These were concerns that were noted from existing tire shops located outside of the city, but in relative proximity to this site. So some of the individuals in attendance have seen facilities that did not meet these criteria. The city, however, has put all of these requirements in place to ensure that the businesses can be good neighbors. In addition, in terms of the appearance of the site, the design review manual does regulate items such as color materials. So the building cannot be painted a bright primary color such as fire engine red in its entirety. That is not permitted within the city of Peoria based on our design review ordinance. As a result, our key findings of this case are that the request is consistent with applicable codes, standards, and guidelines. The use will be compatible with the surrounding uses and will reuse a vacant and vandalized property. And finally, the proposal does not result in detrimental impacts to the surrounding area. As a result, staff is recommending approval of case CU 14-0009, subject to the conditions of approval as stated in the staff report. And with that, I'd take any questions you may have.
Thank you. The commissioners have any questions? Commissioner Loper?
Madam Chair, Melissa, do you know how old the building is? Just approximately?
Commissioner Loper, I'm uncertain. I know that I believe it was vacant since the time of the Olive overpass shortly thereafter, so.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Nelson, do you have a question?
Help me understand why that second driveway off of 75th Avenue was eliminated.
Commissioner Nelson, that was at the request of the engineering and traffic engineering staff. It's my understanding that that driveway was only partially on this property, and as a result, and based on its proximity to other entryways or intersections, they requested that that driveway be closed.
So it was an easement issue of some sort? Is that what you're saying?
I believe that was part of it, and it may also have been, as I said, the separation from the existing intersection.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Sprecher?
Madam Chair, Melissa, in terms of, I may have missed it in the paperwork here, but how about overnight parking? If they've got a number of cars coming in for repair, how are they secured, and how's the property secured?
Commissioner Loper, sorry, Commissioner Sprecher. Sorry there.
That's okay.
I'll answer both of you now. So no overnight parking would be allowed outside of the building. If they did have vehicles that were waiting for repairs, that were queuing for that sort of thing, they would have to be secured inside of the building. They could not remain outside in the parking spaces. Those would only be utilized for instance, customers or staff during operational hours.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lewis?
If I am reading this correctly, the bays where they'll do the work, says roll-up doors, does this indicate, am I reading this correctly, that only the work will be done on the vehicles when the doors are closed?
Commissioner Lewis, it is accurate that we do require all work to be able to be completed within a fully enclosed building. They will have to have building safety, will review their plans to ensure that the circulation systems and the systems would operate with the doors closed. Clearly, the doors would need to open when vehicles are coming in and out, and that is, that's understood. But it does need to be able to operate fully enclosed, meaning with doors down.
I don't think in my entire life I've ever seen a mechanic shop like that had bays where they were doing work in Arizona in the summertime where they were required to keep those doors down. I don't know how practical that is.
And Commissioner Lewis, we have had several auto-related uses in the past come through with that requirement, and I know that our building reviewers have, in fact, ensured that the use can operate in that manner, so that all the systems are designed now to meet that requirement.
I think it is a good requirement if it's practical and if it can be applied and, be followed. Thank you.
I do have a question, and that is, when you spoke with the public, it would seem to me, if this was in my neighborhood, that I wouldn't want an empty building. Because empty buildings just cause more trouble than they're worth. And if they didn't want this kind of business, what kind of business would they anticipate would come in there?
Madam Chair, I believe that one of the individuals may have proposed office or some use of that nature. Obviously, the building was not constructed initially for that, and market forces would dictate what the owner would propose for a use. So whether or not that's economically feasible, staff does not enter into that judgment, but that was what they may have proposed.
And since there was a gas station there, is there some hazmat that had to be cleaned up?
Madam Chair, I don't believe that mitigation came up in the reviews through engineering. From my understanding, that's not something that would have to take place still. The applicant may be able to further speak to that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. Then I'll open the public hearing. And would the applicant like to speak? And would you please state your name and your address?
Madam Chair, my name is Jack Gilmore, Gilmore Planning and Landscape Architecture, 2211 North 7th Street in Phoenix. Melissa's done a great job reviewing our effort to satisfy staff concerns regarding a specific use on this site relative to the conditional use. First answer, relative to the hazmat and use of the property, yes, the gas storage tanks have been removed and Phase 1 was completed, so we have that of record. Everything else that Melissa's reviewed in terms of the use of the building and restrictions on parking and repairs inside the building has been reviewed with our clients, and they're all very acceptable to that condition. I'm glad to answer any more questions.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Nelson?
Wrong button. A question on the lighting. Will you use the existing lighting that's in place, or will you be providing additional lighting at this site?
My clients are negotiating with a couple of users right now. There is an existing sign pylon out on that angled frontage on Grand, and they intend to reuse that sign, and the specific user, I think, will have some influence on how the lighting occurs on site. I don't expect it'll be more than what was there before. I suspect it'll be less than. And it's not a nighttime operation either, so lighting at night, I suspect, would be limited to security lighting only.
That's what I'm thinking of. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Any other questions? I do have a question, and that is, one of the comments made by the public was that they were concerned about the amount of traffic, increase of traffic. Can you tell me what kind of traffic pattern you do expect there?
Madam Chair and members of the commission, access into this site is restricted from West Olive Avenue. The existing driveway off 75th will be closed, and according to the use permit criteria, we will be adding a curb along the north side of the property just to restrict the movement to that driveway. So access is restricted really just to that the West Olive Avenue driveway. There are two driveways off of West Olive, one proximate to our property, and that is shared with that commercial shopping center to the east. There's a second driveway much further east that users would have to pass through their property to get to ours. So right now, all access will be restricted to West Olive Avenue.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you so much. I appreciate you
Thank
speaking
you.
with us tonight. And I have no speakers request form, so I will now close the public hearing. And could I have a discussion or a motion?
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
I move for approval of case CU 14-0009, subject to the conditions of approval as stated in the staff report.
And could I have a second, please?
I second.
Thank you. Would everyone please vote? And that passes. Thank you. I'm sorry, my light didn't light up. Yeah, could you vote one more time? Thank you. It passes. Thank you. The next order of business tonight is 9R, the text amendment, TA 14-0001. A public hearing will be held to consider the City of Peoria initiated request to amend Article 14-2 definitions, Article 14-3 general provisions, Article 14-5 single-family residential districts, Articles 14.9 non-residential districts, and Article 14.39 administrative procedures for the zoning ordinance, effectively establishing criteria in which donation drop-off boxes would be permitted use within the City of Peoria. And could we please have a staff report? Now, will this just be, will you do the whole staff report again from our last meeting? Is that it?
Madam Chair, yes, we're
Okay.
here as an action item this evening.
Great, thank you. Okay, could we have a staff report?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. As I just stated, we're here before you again this evening with the donation bin text amendment for formal action tonight. As stated prior in our study session several weeks ago, staff was directed by council pretty much predicated on citizen concerns, and we were tasked with creating a uniform set of standards that we could apply throughout the city with regards, oops, sorry, went the wrong way there, with regards to donation drop boxes in the city. As we had discussed when we were originally tasked with this, we sat down and we took a look and we started to evaluate really what we wanted to accomplish here. And certainly the easiest and the 500-pound gorilla, so to speak, was the public nuisance aspect of this. But as we started to look farther into that, it brought up questions with regards to owner authorization, the ability to be in these spots. It also, brought into question the quantity of bins in the city as well as locations and how they were accumulating in specific areas. And more importantly, as we looked at this as a whole, we saw that there was clearly a need in the ordinance for an accountability aspect of it. And not only that, but to really look at something that would address the responsiveness of that. So when we combined all of this together, the objectives of the ordinance really became quite clear, and we were able to focus these into 3 different areas. And we broke it down basically into accountability, aesthetics, how they would sit within the city, and then certainly the process that we needed to put together that would allow us to enforce these uniform standards in which we have before you this evening. From an accountability standpoint, we thought that owner authorization or a legal representative of the owner was absolutely critical to being able to base our ordinance around that. In addition to that, we thought as a benefit, including, and we'll talk about the TUP process here in just a moment, but with a 2-part process with the owner authorization and with a person having to obtain a TUP, it gave us basically 2 avenues into the person that would be locating these bins in our city to be able to hold accountable and to be able to have reasonable expectations when issues arise with these bins. The other thing that I think that we focused on, and I think it's quite clear in our ordinance, is that we had to create not only some standards with regards to responsiveness, but clearly outline expectations within the ordinance that are very concrete and very hardline. For example, within 24 hours of notification, if there are issues out there, within 5 days of notification if bins are damaged. So we included that criteria in here, and I think that along with the, being able to deal with damaged bins, those that are graffiti, and obviously the items that are left outside the box, I think the ordinance addresses the accountability factor that we were looking for. From an aesthetics portion, we looked at several different things, and it was not just one. We looked at and evaluated with respect to location to arterials, being able to put these on paved surfaces, because we noticed in the city that they were, that sometimes they were just dumped on dirt undeveloped pads. We made a point that they cannot reduce required parking in any of the locations that they're in, that they cannot obstruct vehicles or pedestrian circulation. Additionally, it can't be just an open-ended 3.5 yard bin. It's got to have a firmly closing lid. It has to have the materials that are clearly identified on the bin for the donation, and it can't be any larger than 6 cubic yards. Another important aspect of this was looking at the concentration of bins and what was going on around the city. And the image that you see to the right is basically a 1.5 mile radius of where we sit here tonight, and it shows you that basically I believe there are 42 bins. I can't remember the exact math on that, but there are 42 bins within a 1.5 mile radius of where we're sitting. What we found was that with the ability to drop off multiple in the same location tended to lead to more mass dumping. The more bins there were, we tend to find that the bigger the illegal dumping became. So we limited these, if it's a 0 to 1 acre site, they would be able to have 1 box. Within this ordinance, if it's a 1 to 3 acre site, they'd be able to have 2 boxes. 3 acres or more would be capped at 4 boxes. I would also note that no more than 2 boxes can be clustered together at any one location. Okay? Moving on to the process, we thought it was important that we define it clearly, and if you're going to do business in the city of Peoria, then you need to have a business license. Additionally, it will require a temporary use permit, which is taken over the counter at the city. It is reviewed by staff, would then be approved and sent back out. That gives us the ability to look at a site plan, be able to evaluate the site, where the bin is going to be located, and be able to enforce the standards in which you see in this ordinance before you this evening. Also, with this process that we have before you tonight, it gives the city the ability to revoke a temporary use permit. More importantly, I think it gives the city the ability to evaluate future temporary use requests based on previous temporary use requests. There's that old saying that, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So that's an important avenue that we have as well. And additionally, the temporary use permit would be renewable every 12 months. So again, it gives us the ability, if we're having issues, if it's not a good fit, if it's creating any type of issue that we're not being able to get handled correctly or within the specific time frame, it gives us the ability to just not renew that. Internally, and just a little bit of how we got to where we were, or where we are tonight, excuse me. We had numerous internal staff meetings. We met with the city attorney's office. We worked with Jack Stroud, who's here tonight with code enforcement. He and Tony Tate were wonderful in their input on this. We had two stakeholder meetings. We had one in February of 2014. We brought them back again in September to present a draft ordinance to them. We solicited written comments for them. One of the stakeholders, asked us to include those comments as part of the record tonight. That's Exhibit B in your staff report this evening. We took into consideration their thoughts, their concerns. We revised our draft ordinance as we saw appropriately, and that is what we presented to you, the commission session, basically about 3 weeks ago. There was a lot of good discussion at the study session, and I just wanted to touch on a couple of things real quick that came out of that. We talked a lot about property owner accountability, and Commissioner Lewis brought it up more specifically, and I just wanted to be crystal clear in that two things. One, I have Jack Stroud here from Code Compliance tonight to be able to answer any questions that might be more specific to that. But with this process that we have in here, we have direct accountability from the owner. And Code Compliance has the ability to not only go after any issues with the entity that is obtaining the temporary use permit, but if those things are not cited, or if those things are not rectified in a timely manner, they also have the ability to cite the owner. The other question that came up out of that was a need, and I believe it was Commissioner Spraker and Commissioner Loper that talked about the need for a weekly inspection. So we included that in provision number 9 in there, where it states that, at a minimum, they'll be required to visit those boxes once a week. If they need more, then that will, that is to be determined, but a minimum, every box within the city that's in the TUP process or in the TUP approved will be visited at least once a week. The other thing that we touched on, and I just wanted to kind of reiterate with it, is that we're looking at a compliance timeline somewhere around 6 months. It's a time frame that we proposed to the stakeholders in the second meeting in September, and that seemed to be a time frame that everyone thought was fair and feasible as well. And just last and not least, Madam Chair, there were several questions, to the box owners themselves that I didn't want to speak for. And I just wanted to let you know that I believe representatives are here tonight and are available for questions as well. Ma'am, that concludes my presentation this evening. We're recommending approval of the text amendment in front of you tonight, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And I really wish you hadn't done these reports, because now I see these bins everywhere. I never saw them before, So you bring it to my attention, and now I understand why they have to be regulated. So are there any questions? Commissioner Nelson?
Madam Chair? Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for you, Rick. In the In the language, it says that the ordinance authorizes the city to remove and dispose of any drop-off box which is unauthorized, unpermitted, or otherwise in violation. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by dispose of? Is it brought to a holding area where the owner can pick it up, or do we destroy it? What does that mean?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Nelson, the mechanism that's in place is actually twofold. All right, the city has the ability through an outside entity to remove the box. So we've had conversations with Western Towing. They have supported coming out, removing a bin, and holding it at their location until someone comes to claim it. The other avenue that we have is through the Code Compliance Department. And Jack, if I'm get this wrong, please correct me. Code Compliance has the ability to put that ownership of removal back on the property owner themselves. I think that what would predicate how that ends up happening is, if we revoke a temporary use permit, and I'm speaking in a scenario that I'm trying to envision down the road here. If we have an issue where we have to revoke a temporary use permit and it is causing or proposing some kind of public safety hazard where we needed to respond immediately, then we have the ability to call Western Towing to come out, pick it up, and remove it from the site. They will hold it at their holding yard. As I stated in the last, in the study session, these bins, and I don't know the exact cost, but somewhere between $2,000 and $2,500. So if that is removed, someone, I believe, is going to come looking for it.
Okay. Thank you. That answers my
Thank
question.
you. Commissioner Lewis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rick, I just had one question about that same thing about the weekly inspections. When you read the language that's been put in the draft, it doesn't say weekly inspections, it says weekly pickups, doesn't it?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, I believe it does say weekly pickup.
Because inspection just doesn't really, the term, when you say a weekly inspection, just means they go and inspect it and look at it. But the draft language is much stronger than that, and it says, I believe it says, it has to be removed once, all the contents have to be removed once a week. So that's really what we're talking about, right?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, that is correct, and I misspoke with regards to the inspection. What we're requiring them are to clear the contents of the bin a minimum of once a week.
That's great. Thank you very much.
I have a few questions. If I remember correctly, at our last meeting when you discussed this project, you talked about, you went around and you had actually called some of the phone numbers on the bins, and they were obsolete. So now, under this ordinance, if the numbers aren't accurate, what power do you have?
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, through the TUP process, this again gives us another avenue. Instead of, and you're absolutely right, that slide that I showed you with all the bins, I drove around the city and I ended up seeing 70-something bins and got all the names and numbers so that I could invite them to our stakeholder meeting. I don't know the exact number, but I can tell you that there were a bunch of them that I called, emailed, left messages, and never heard back. Other members of that had bins in here, I heard back from instantly. So I don't want to paint that with a broad brush. Through the TUP process, they will have to affix the TUP number right on the bin. All right. One of the requirements as they come through this process is that they have to have a local telephone number and contact person. So with that TUP number affixed to that bin, and they'll have to go out and get a number from, letters from Home Depot and post them right on there or wherever they go to get them. It will tell us who's responsible for that TUP, and on that TUP application, we will have a local contact and a local response person.
Okay. The other question I have is, I'm just going to make up a charity. So I have a box, and that box says, I don't know, Golden Charity for Homeless Children. That's my charity. But I don't really have the facilities to pick up clothes. And so I'm going to have the Williams go to pick it up. And I think that does happen in reality. I know we donate things to a women's shelter, but yet it really goes to a church because the women's shelter can't handle it. So who gets the license? Whoever has the box, not the pickup people.
Yeah, Madam Chair, members of the commission, it would be whoever's installing the box out there. You know, with regards to what name might be on there, or what charity name might be on there, you know, that's not what we're trying to regulate here tonight. We're trying to, you know, put a blanket set of standards out there that we can enforce equally and equitably across the board. Whether it's profit or nonprofit is really, we have been over backwards to stay out of that argument, you know, and it's, from a personal standpoint, you cannot deal with this and not have that come into this. I found that out day one, you know, but that's not what we were trying to do here. What we were trying to do is, regardless of whether you're for-profit, whether you're nonprofit, whether you're giving it away, you know, here's a blanket set of standards that everybody has to play by that we can equitably enforce across the board.
So whoever's name is on the box is the only person who has the license, right?
I'm sorry, ma'am?
The person who has the name on the box, the organization with the name on the box, is the person who has the license.
Madam Chair, not necessarily. I mean, it could be ABC charity, and it might be somebody obtaining that TUP in that you know, in a different name. You know, there's no question that, you know, that sometimes the contents of these boxes go many different places. You know, there may be, you know, a portion of it may be going, I don't know the business plan. But there may be, you know, ABC charity may be represented by, you know, DEF Company. DEF Company comes in and obtains the temporary use permit with local, you know, with local contact information, and they would place that bin out there. So it is very possible that you could have, you know, that the charity that's on the box is not necessarily the people that are servicing it, picking it up, clearing it out, correcting any issues that might be going on with it. So does that answer the question?
Well, it answers my question, but it gives me another question.
Okay.
So that is, if I have a license, I'm assuming that I'm going to pay taxes, or that license isn't dependent on how much I collect, right? It's just a flat license. So I'm going to pay the same amount as the next person, or is it based on volume?
Madam Chair, within our fee structure, we do have so a temporary use permit is a $100 fee, okay? But we do have a fee structure that says if you're a not-for-profit entity and you can demonstrate that, then it's basically a 10% of the fee. So a non-for-profit entity would pay $10 as opposed to a $100 fee for a for-profit. But just to give a little more clarity to the question you asked, Rick, so the bin purveyor, whoever is going to place the bin that's responsible for the bin, would be the one that would sign the application for the TUP. Now, they would also be responsible to put their contact information on the bin, some local contact that we can find out if we have issues with it. Also, in addition to that, we're going to require that there be some form of authorization from the owner that they enable the bin purveyor to provide that on their property, and it's going to be the owner and/or authorized representative. So those two forms will require with the TUP.
Okay, because maybe I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that your example, ABC charity may only get 10% of the money that comes out of that ban, but DEF, who is the pickup person, the distribution person, may be getting the 90%.
Madam Chair, I'm just speaking of the actual fee when a purveyor submits a temporary use permit. And this is the same for all our applications, whether it's a conditional use permit or a zoning application. There is a break for not-for-profit.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes. Commissioner Springer.
Mr. Williams, question. Thank you, Madam Chair. On item 9, it said, and I think this was brought up by Commissioner Lewis, it says that all donated items must be collected and stored in the donation/recycling drop-off box, and all contents cleared no less than once a week. Some of the pictures that you showed where there were, I don't know, 6 boxes or something like that, and the stuff was spread all over the parking lot or whatever, I'm presuming when it says no less than once a week, that in a particularly busy area, it would be up to the operator or whomever is on the permit to go out, if necessary, more than once a week, if this, the donated items are spread all over the place and not just in that 6 cubic foot box times 6 or 4, I think is what the limit is.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner Sprague, I think that's a fair assumption that, you know, it's in their best interest if they're in a busy location to be clearing that out as often as needed. You know, if there's not room in their bin, then it's either going outside the bin or it's going somewhere else, and that's, you know, that's losing revenue. The other advantage to that is that, you know, there's certainly an incentive within, you know, for them to keep that bin clear and to keep that area clear outside, because they are good locations. They do bring in, you know, large quantities of textile goods. You know, so I think that the system itself, you know, is somewhat self-policing to an extent. The other thing that I think it does is it clearly creates you know, an environment where it's beneficial for, if you're located next to another box and you come to clean it up and there's stuff outside the box, or, I mean, if you come to, you know, collect your bin, you know, and there's stuff outside the next guy's bin, you know, they'll take that as well. So there are some self-policing aspects to this as well.
One other question. Discounting the fact that, you know, the box, responsible people are going to pick up the items in the box and furniture, whatever boxes that are outside of the box. What about where trash is collected? And I'm not talking about donated items, but where, you know, they dropped off a box full of stuff and napkins flew out of it, or plastic bags are hanging around or hanging on a bush in back of it that would be attributable to those boxes being there. Who's responsible for cleaning up the trash?
That's a good question.
Commissioner Spraker, members of the commission, if it's trash that we can reasonably believe it's related to the drop box, then we would work with the drop box purveyor. So upon discovery, so we've identified a problem, they have to remove that problem within 24 hours of that.
I'd like to make a suggestion, is that if I, as a business person, had 4 boxes sitting over at Home Depot, and it's earning me income or money for charities or whatever, however the money is earned and spent, that if the box area is beginning to look like it's a mess because of maybe Burger King cups are slashed around, or Quick Trip cups are all over the place and so forth, it would seem to me that if I had a business and it were a building such as we just talked about, the automobile repair business down on Olive, that I'd want to clean up the site. But if I'm not obligated to clean up the site, I might say, well, I'm going to pick up my disused furniture and clothing and so forth, and the guys down the block have got, or just next to me, they got 2 or 3 containers, but this place is still looking like a mess. It seems to me there ought to be some, rather than happenstance or goodwill sort of thing, is that somebody should, and no pun intended, but there should be some requirement for these sites to be kept clear of trash, not defining the donated items as trash, but those things that will collect around the boxes or between the boxes, water bottles and cups and paper bags and McDonald's bags and so forth. Any thoughts on that?
Commissioner Spraker, are you suggesting maybe for the staff to identify some language somewhere within the provisions that require the bin purveyor to the area around the box to provide it, to ensure that it's kept litter-free, perhaps?
Yes, I think it's for sanitary purposes in every respect. I think that should be considered as part of this proposal.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions? Yes. Ms. Strickman?
Okay, I have a couple of questions. I believe you mentioned that it's going to take like 6 months from the time that this actually is enacted before we get everything working. Now, what happens with bins that in that 6-month period never got licensed or the TUP?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, I think the objective is, again, this ordinance still has to go to council, and we're going to take it to council as part of a study session first, but it still has to go to council. And what we're saying is, upon their action, and assuming they support the ordinance, then there's going to be a 6-month period for all the bin purveyors to, submit their applications for the TUP. So in the intervening time, again, we would not be under the standards of the new ordinance. It would not be effective until 6 months after council action. So in that timeframe, they'd be under today's non-standards.
Right, no, I
right?
know not today, I'm just
Right.
saying once it, so then at the end of 6 months, is somebody going to go out and see who isn't licensed and pull those bins?
Correct, because as Rick pointed out, some of these sites, there's going to be some limitations, and we find some sites that are beyond that limitation. So some of these bins are going to have to be removed. So it's going to be basically first come, whoever can get their temporary use permit first on a particular site up to that point.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple more. You had mentioned that a nonprofit would only pay 10% of the fee. In the example we were talking about, that maybe 90%, actually, the bin owner itself is not really the nonprofit, but they give some of it to a nonprofit. How does that fall into place for the fee? Is that under the nonprofit, or is that under the profit?
Madam Chair, the bin purveyor, if they are a certified nonprofit, they would have to demonstrate that with the relevant paperwork upon submittal of the TUP. So they would have to like any application, to get the break, they would have to demonstrate that.
Okay. And another comment kind of in the trash issue is like, okay, we see all these bins and sometimes they have mattresses and all this stuff that's not necessarily garbage, but it's stuff that doesn't fit into the bin. And that, let's say that is not being picked up. We know that we can take away the bin by towing it, but what happens to all the stuff around it? Will that be also towed away?
Madam Chair, are you speaking to just general litter that's around the lot?
I'm speaking about the mattress that gets left out there or the furniture that gets left out there.
In that example, and we would work with the bin purveyor, because we've discovered that there's a problem out there, and we would try to assess, if there's a couple bins, we'd probably contact both of them, but we would try to work with them to pick up the mattress within that period of time, because they have to remove that debris within that 24 hours of discovery. So we'd work with the bin purveyors to pick those up.
Okay, and then the responsibility, you said, is kind of a shared responsibility? It's the bin purveyor and the landowner, or is it just the bin purveyor?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, it's really a joint responsibility, because we're asking, because the owner is providing the ability for the bin purveyor to locate on their property. So they do accept some responsibility there, and that's why we're asking for them to be a party to the application to acknowledge that the bin is there legally. So again, we're going to work with the bin purveyor first to abate any nuisance problem, but ultimately we can work with the owner as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. I'm going to open this public. I'm going to open this public hearing, and I have 4 speaker request forms. I'm not calling these in any order, just the order they handed them to me. And the first person to speak will be Robbie Milner. Robbie Milner. And I'm asking you to please come up, state your name and your address for the record. And you'll have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners, and staff. My name is Robbie Milner. I reside at 12304 East Poinsettia Drive, Scottsdale, Arizona. I work for American Textile Recycling Services, one of the largest bin purveyors in Arizona, and we are national. The presentation that you've seen and the presentation that I'm sure that you're going to see moving forward paints a pretty bleak picture of our industry, and I would like to give you a little bit of a background in terms of what we do, the services that we provide, and a little bit more as to how we operate. The textile recycling industry is the oldest recycling industry in the world, in fact. And the average American generates every year approximately, and throws away every year approximately 70 pounds of textiles. To put that into perspective, it would take about 3 shirts like this to make up a pound. However, only 15% of that is being recycled today. And the balance of it is ending up in your landfills, which takes between 40 and 60 years for it to degrade. 95% of what is getting thrown away can, in fact, be reused in some format or another. So it is really a shame that so much of these textiles are, in fact, being thrown away. In addition to that, there is the charity component. Many of the bin purveyors are associated with charities and contribute a huge amount of charities. Our company, since its existence, has contributed over $5 million, and here in Arizona, it's almost $1 million to charities since our existence, which is, in fact, in Arizona since 2008. Donation bins provide an easy and convenient solution for textile recycling. Our goal is to make textile recycling and reuse as easy and convenient for the consumer out there. And we recognize that the spotlight that we've been placed under and the fact that textile recycling is starting to become a normal, or we're hoping is starting to become a normal everyday occurrence, that there are a lot of people out there that are not wanting to, are not willing to follow the rules and the regulations. We unfortunately cannot control the way the public behave. However, we certainly can control the way we react to that behavior. And I'm very pleased to say that none of our bins were, in fact, represented on the presentation that you saw. We have a goal in our company to respond immediately to any complaint that we receive. We, in fact, have a 90% ratio of sorting out the complaints that we receive within 2 hours, and the balance is done the same day. Okay. We are fully in support of regulating the industry. We recognize, as I said, that there are elements within the industry that are not willing to play by the rules, and trust me, it makes our lives very, very difficult. And we are absolutely for regulation as far as the industry is concerned. However, that regulation should not be designed to obliterate the industry, but rather to regulate the industry and allow us to provide a reasonable solution for a real problem that we have out there. We would like the regulations to be fair to everybody and not to be punitive. Okay.
Mr. Milner, could you just finish?
Sure.
Your time is up.
Okay. Thank you. I'm open to any questions that the council might have. Oh, sorry, the
Thank you.
commission might have.
Commissioner Loper?
I think you're going to get into this, and I don't want to give you a forum just to continue talking, but
Sure.
what are the specific elements of the proposed ordinance, maybe the top 2 or 3 that you could briefly tell us that you have an issue with?
The ordinance that has been proposed by staff, we do not have any issue with it. There is one element in it which I think is just in terms of language. I'm not sure whether it was made aware of it. Is that there was one element, I can't remember the exact wording, was that if one of our locations is non-compliant, it can result in the revocation of our business license. And I think we just need to tweak that, because we would have a business license for the city, and if we have, say, 10 locations in the city and one of our bins is out of compliance, revoke that permit, not revoke our business license for the entire city. If we are a repetitive, or if we repeat the offense on multiple occasions, then absolutely, take our business license away from us and don't allow us to operate within the city. We are not like that. So, some of the questions that you had with regarding the pickups and how often we pick them up and what we do, we have a policy in our company. We service our bins a minimum of 3 times a week. Our bigger locations, we service 5 times a week. We have a trash truck and a trash route that just services the areas where we have trash issues. We also clean 20 feet around our bin of everything that is there. Doesn't matter what it is, we pick it all up.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. The next speaker is Jim Mapstead. And please state your name and address for the record.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, I'm Jim Mapstead, 8837 North Central in Phoenix, Arizona. And as a former member of the Phoenix Planning Commission, I appreciate your service. Thank you very much. I'm here tonight speaking on behalf of a coalition of neighborhood activists and property managers in the Valley who support the regulation of donation bins in our communities. Last year, the City of Phoenix joined a growing list of communities throughout the nation in adopting an ordinance to clean up properties from unwanted donation bins. It's estimated that there are over 7,000 donation bins throughout the Valley. Many of these bins are dropped on commercial property without consent of the property owner or manager, and it is nearly impossible to reach the owner of the bins to have them removed, as you already know. In Phoenix, this has led to severe cases of neighborhood blight by evidence of the slides that you've seen this evening. In addition to being a businessman, I'm also board chair of Local First Arizona, a community organization that promotes and encourages people to do business with both for-profit and nonprofit organizations in their neighborhoods and cities. It is concerning to me that many of the bin owners are for-profit entities that turn around and sell donated items not only in other states, but throughout the rest of the world as well. Our local communities aren't seeing the benefit of local people's thoughtful decisions, and quite frankly, it's a bit disingenuous for some of these for-profit entities to put a decal of a nonprofit entity and our neighbors thinking that they're donating to these nonprofits when in fact the bulk and the majority of these profits are going to for-profit corporations. Most of these charities represented by these bin companies aren't local, and the ones that are receive very little percentage of the profit made on donated bins. I would argue that the amount of revenues given to charities by these for-profit companies is no greater in terms of either percentage or dollars than what I or any other business owner donates throughout the year. And we don't contribute to neighborhood blight. In Phoenix, I and my neighbors wholeheartedly supported a similar ordinance to clean up our neighborhoods and set a policy that makes sense for local communities. Ideally, cities across the valley will also set policies to provide continuity. And that's why I fully support the Peoria's leadership in the West Valley to combat the unwanted proliferation of blight in your neighborhoods. And I ask that you approve this text amendment tonight. Thank you very much, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you, I
Thank you.
appreciate it. The next application I have is Jason Morris, and you didn't mark if you wanted to speak. You do? Please. Okay. Will you state your name and address for the record?
All right. Madam Chair, I also have a PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to try and speed through in 3 minutes. Jason Morris, Withy Morris, 2525 East Arizona Biltmore Circle, on behalf of Goodwill of Central Arizona. And is that going? Madam Chair and Commissioners, first of all, I'd like to compliment staff. The truth is staff has done the bulk of the work on this, and they really have reached out to the community. It's been pointed out that you are the first West Valley community to take this issue up, and staff has done an excellent job in putting together an ordinance that I think both sides of the equation seem to be supportive of. We are, however, going to recommend some minor adjustments and improvements to an ordinance that we think is already very strong, because there are a series of issues that you're trying to address. Many of them have already been touched on tonight, but not all of them. Certainly, those are the overriding factors and why you would want to have an ordinance in place. We've talked about unmonitored dumping on these sites and what can occur in those sites. We've talked about the proliferation of bins. When there is more than one bin, what can happen within that area. And these are some examples throughout the city that you'll see. Not only in this instance are we talking about the gathering of bins, but we're also talking about parking spaces being utilized. We're talking about the clustering of bins on sites. These may be large sites, but the more bins that are clustered together, the more proliferation of the trash around them. Those are obviously taking up parking spaces. We see as bins are put together, this instance shows what happens to the landscaping. These are landscape islands that when a planning commission such as yourself approves a shopping center, you're counting on open space and landscaping being alive and being present. These bins kill that. You also see the results of things that can't fit within the bins. Graffiti, This is a right-of-way violation. So here's an example of something that's not taking up a parking space, and frankly, it is in a landscape setting, but you can also appreciate that the only way that somebody would actually be able to donate within a bin that was positioned like this is to actually stop traffic flow in a driveway, which would then result in traffic flow being interrupted on the roadway. I point out that the dumping occurs not only on the site, but also on neighboring sites. This is an example of a shopping center that was developed and a vacant parcel next door. Well, it was the shopping center that's taken the bulk of the impact of these bins, but it was the property owner who had a vacant property who permitted the use, if it was permitted at all. So it's not necessarily just one property owner that gets impacted, but surrounding property owners. Again, this is a different angle, but it also shows some of the debris that's around the bin. I point that out because we've discussed who would ultimately be responsible. And while it's great to clean 20 feet around these bins, trash that collects and is assorted around the shopping center will ultimately be the responsibility of the property owner, and they will be cited because no bin operator is going to stand up and say, you know what, that's our garbage.
Mr. Morris, could you conclude your presentation?
I can, and Madam Chair, I'm going to do that with the request that we address two issues within your ordinance. Those two issues are written property owner authorization that is notarized. We've heard staff discuss today that it is the property owner's responsibility as well as the bin operator. In the city of Peoria, staff has been reluctant to require notarization in this issue because, frankly, I believe, Mr. Hawkins can correct me, I don't believe notarization is required with your other applications. In this instance, however, unlike other applications for zoning, which take time and change a map, these applications are given over the counter. It doesn't go through a public hearing process, and there is no one verifying at the city that the signature on the application is actually the entity or the property representation that's appropriate. But at the end of the day, the property owner can get cited. And if in fact the city issues permits based on signatures, which may in fact not be valid, it may be the manager of the store that happens to be located in that parking lot, it may be somebody who doesn't have authorization to sign this document, giving a permit to a bin operator will make it next to impossible to have that bin removed because the property owner is going to be faced with a bin operator that says, but I have a permit. Because both the bin operator and the property owner are responsible, it should be a notarized document so that the city is satisfied and the city doesn't have to go out and verify that it's the actual property owner who is signing these documents. That is our first request of a change to your existing ordinance, that you require notarization, and we can provide language for you and staff if you'd like it. The second issue is allowing the property owners to have control of these permits and have the right of self-action. Staff alluded to it earlier, but it's important that it be codified, that these property owners have the ability to remove a bin. Because while there may be language in there that requires weekly inspections or maintenance, if in fact it becomes a daily problem and the city isn't able to act immediately, the property owner should be able to take self-action and remove these bins. I'll conclude, Madam Chair, by pointing out this is your ordinance as it exists today. You're granting a favor to bin operators, and we're not here to put bin operators out of business. We're here to try and level the playing field. There is regulation on every other land use, and in fact, your existing regulations, as is shown on this screen, require trash bins to be concealed, to be placed on a site plan. Typically, they're in the rear of a shopping center. You are granting the right for these bins to be upfront, close, and visible to the rest of the parking lot and the rights-of-ways. So merely regulating them and requiring notarization and other things certainly is not a hardship. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Thank you. Then we'll move on to our last speaker, which is Thelma Ross. Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Spranker?
I have a question. You're representing Goodwill, is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
Are all of Goodwill's boxes and points of receipt at the back of the store in an enclosure?
Madam Chair, Mr. Commissioner, Goodwill does not operate a single box. And as to their donations, the City of Peoria requires all donations be at the rear of the store. So yes, we are highly regulated.
Does Goodwill perceive, because you mentioned this yourself during your closing remarks, does Goodwill perceive or think that these independents that have their boxes out should have them all in an enclosure and be on the original site plan development? Is that what you're proposing?
Madam Chair, Mr. Commissioner, I was pointing that out as an example of what your current regulations are for trash. I bring it up because Goodwill, and we know this because I was in front of your commission for a store for Goodwill, and that was a 6-month process. It was multiple public hearings, and we're now open and operating within the City of Peoria with employees, paying city permits, city taxes, and employees. In this instance, these bins that are dropped on properties and appear in parking lots don't have the same level of scrutiny. This ordinance, frankly, will provide that scrutiny, and we support it. All we're asking is that you make sure that it's not just a free pass, that in this instance, a property owner has the right by a notarized document to allow these rather than just anyone signing a document. And no, we're not advocates of putting them in enclosures because frankly, I think that would have the potential for more trash and it may cause other trouble. But we would point out all of your other similar bins within the City of Peoria, and in fact, Goodwill, even though we're leasing space and paying our landlords and paying a rental tax to the City of Peoria, we have to take our donations in the back, not through the front door, and as a result have not been able to open a single donation center. Although we have them in other jurisdictions across the valley, the City of Peoria is the only jurisdiction where Goodwill has not been able to open a donation center, a standalone donation center, because we would take donations through the front door.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Thank you. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Okay, our last speaker of the evening, and you didn't mark that you wanted to speak. I'm assuming you do. Yes. Thank you. Thelma Ross, would you please come up and state your name and address?
My name is Thelma Ross. I'm the CEO for the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, 4201 North 16th Street, Phoenix, Arizona. The National Council has been in Phoenix, Arizona for 53 years, so we don't put our name on something lightly. ATRS operates, which is a for-profit, the bins, which we as a nonprofit benefit from greatly, threefold. One is we receive financial support from them that allows children to be children. We work with women with children. Weldon House is available for 2 to 3 years. If it was not for their support, we could not allow these women that time to get their lives together, to create a home, to go to school, to get job skill training. The financial support is vital. We also want the children to be children, and the financial support helps in after-school activities, allows them to be part of sports, music, art. It provides them with brand new school uniforms, new shoes twice a year. It gives them confidence. What I was going to say before, I'm going to change kind of course now, because I do not believe that you can compare a trash bin with a donation bin. The women that we serve and the children that we treat have been thrown away by society many times in the trash bin. I see the donation bins as hope. And yes, I totally agree that they do definitely need to be regulated. Just like any industry, any business, you're going to have those that are ethical and those that are not. So I definitely support that. I don't believe that it's realistic to have notarized approval from a property owner, because if you're going to put one in Walmart, there is no way you're ever going to get in touch with the owner of Walmart. We have a lot of support from the community as a result of those boxes as well. People look us up, they contact us, how else can we help? Again, I just want to say that I applaud you for regulating them, but I think the direction that you're going is very, very appropriate. And it's just not about recycling. It's about people and people's lives and children, and that's what we represent. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. I'm going to close the public hearing. And any questions from or comments from the commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Spraker?
I don't know, Madam Chair, I don't know if this goes to staff or to whom, but the lady makes a point. If the local manager for Walmart over here in Peoria said, yeah, you know, over on that corner or wherever, you can put up a couple boxes for whatever purpose, and the ordinance says that we have to have the owner sign off on it, she's right. You're never going to get in touch with the owner of a public corporation. They'll never agree to it because they're going to perceive too many legal liabilities, and it's a pain in the butt anyway. So perhaps if that comes about, that we talk about the responsible person for that particular property, meaning responsible person would be whoever is responsible for the Walmart parking lot, the manager of the store, I would presume. So just a thought. I thought that was an excellent point. You just can't, if we make it a blanket, then we're going to eliminate a lot of property that is corporately owned, and they're just not going to allow these donation boxes.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, you know, we're not talking about getting authorization from the manager of PetSmart. We're talking about getting authorization for whatever legal entity has the right to speak on behalf of the ownership. So they are, in fact, when they're signing the application and providing the information, they are testing that they have the ability to speak on behalf of the ownership. If we find otherwise, that is, we do have the ability to revoke the permit.
I was just addressing the fact that if when the representative for Goodwill was talking about having the signature and the word owner came up, well, a lot of property doesn't have an owner, like I own my house or something. And my concern is that we make it so restrictive that we eliminate the ability. That's my only concern.
Other comments? Yes, Commissioner Loper?
Madam Chair, a couple of things. One, getting to the question or comment just raised by Commissioner Spraker. I know this was discussed a little bit previously about do we do notarized signature or not, and is it the property owner or the authorized agent? It just struck me that in some cases I was looking at your ordinance, in some cases I was looking at different ordinance. So I now get the difference between the two. So in the proposal by Mr. Morris, it's section 12 or subsection 12 about having a notarized letter of authorization from the property owner or authorized agent. Is there comparable language, forget about the notarization for right now, in the draft from staff? Trying to figure out.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, so if you look at our draft, so it's item 1, Article 14.3, General Provisions.
Okay.
Upon receipt of written authorization by the property owner or authorized agent.
And so their intent is really just to add the word notarized letter of in that. Because I think a month ago we had the workshop on it, I was inclined to not really care about the notarization, because that's consistent with how Peoria does their applications. And I'm not one that likes to add additional things to anybody, but I will say that I've since kind of kicked it around internally in what I do, and Peoria is one of the few places that doesn't require notarized signatures for applications, just period, for whether it's a rezoning or comprehensive plan amendment or CUP or whatever. You know, and some places have really detailed forms and stuff. Personally, I'm in support of the notarized authorization for the reasons that were outlined by Mr. Morris, but I actually see us probably having to move that way anyway, just so we get a better lockdown on who we're actually dealing with and who's representing who. So I support that personally. The other comment that was made, an outstanding job by the gentleman who spoke for the industry. Suffice it to say that if everybody operated that way, we probably wouldn't have a need to be meeting about this. So hats off to you. And the lady who sits behind him who spoke, hats off to what you do and the organization you represent and others like you. Because I think for me, as somebody who's used drop boxes a lot in the past, the intent is, yeah, it's to get rid of the stuff that didn't sell at the yard sale, but it's also you think you're helping. You'd like to think you're helping. And I don't think that anybody wants to take that away from it. But I didn't hear you say that you thought it took away from you support the regulation. So hopefully I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I appreciated what you had to say. A couple of other things. It was mentioned about the Goodwill. I remember when that Goodwill went in at Lake Pleasant and 83rd or whatever the cross streets are. It's always hard for me to figure out. And we do regulate that one heavily. Has to be at the rear of the building. There's certain hours. They've got a camera where somebody watches it 24/7. You know, if you go back there and do something, there's somebody on you. And then I'm also thinking, although it's in Glendale, but there's a drop-off facility at 83rd, right at the freeway by the Starbucks and the Walmart there at 83rd and Union Hills. And that one is the rear of the store. And it never really dawned on me how that's it's a disadvantage for when you're trying to lease, because nobody leases a back of a store, you lease a front of the store, a storefront, so that you're seen. And I'm not advocating necessarily that we take donations at the rear, and I think the enclosure, although I appreciate the analogy, I think that's a little bit overkill, but you know, maybe another iteration down the line, we may want to consider putting these back. You know, I don't want to hurt the public part of it, because when the ones in Lake Pleasant, the drop bins got removed after a while, and they were a real eyesore. After my next yard sale, I didn't know where to go. I couldn't find a place. So, you know, I don't know how you'd solve that, but I think the intent is trying to cut down the amount of litter. One other thing that was brought up by Mr. Morris was about oh heck, I forgot my thought. But could you address that? Because I thought hopefully you remember what he said, but I thought your ordinance was okay the way it was written for the issue that he had addressed. See, we remember, do we need him to remind us? Not trying to give him more time to talk, but.
It was the owner's self-action.
Owner's self-action. Isn't that already kind of addressed in here? That the owner, I mean, that's more of a private matter between the owner and any tenant, be it, you know, a Walmart and then it's a pad out in front, not to throw anybody under the bus, but it's a Circle K or a McDonald's and they have an issue. Those are private things that this really doesn't preempt or interfere with anyway, does it?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Lopez, since you're looking at me, no, it certainly doesn't impact the existing, you know, private property rights that property owner has to deal with his property the way that he wants to.
Would the language that Mr. Morris proposed need to be in there so that it clarifies it, or so that it somehow lets the property owner off the hook, if you will? Because he could point to a city ordinance that says, you know, this does not preempt my ability. Does it help her? What's your opinion, I guess?
I suppose I'm not going to give you one, because I don't really think it's a legal issue in the end. So I would almost defer that to staff, because they're the ones who are trying to create a regulatory scheme here that will be the most effective possible, and they've looked at a lot more than I would say. I really would kind of punt it back to them.
I'm writing this down. An attorney did not have an opinion on it. Hey, so, I don't know, Chris or Rick, if you wanted to speak to that particular issue about whether the language that Mr. Morris talked about for, kind of the self-help, is that needed, not needed? What's the opinion? Because I wouldn't want to preempt it, but I don't think it does. But that's me personally, and I'm not an attorney, so.
Madam Chair, members of the commission. Yeah, I think when we, I was just looking at this language as Mr. Morris was speaking. I think when we first, when there was first some input that was provided, I thought the input was notarization by the owner, and then we saw that as problematic because some of these ownerships, as some of the speakers have identified, might be multinationals, trust, hard to get a hold of. But their language that I do see is Exhibit B does suggest or notarized signature of the owner or authorized agent. Now, authorized agent is a lot more accessible, and that might be something we could consider. It's a lot more accessible than the owner, of course.
Okay. And what about the self-help provision? You think we're good on that, or?
Could you restate that?
There, Mr. Morris talked about adding language under his, which again, I had confused initially with yours or ours, that would make sure it clarifies that a property owner, that this ordinance allows a property owner to go ahead and take care of business on his own. And my comment was, you don't necessarily need an ordinance to do that, but does it help clarify for the, is it your opinion that we need language like that in there, or is that it's just good okay, as it is?
Let me defer to Rick on this one.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, the essence of the TUP indicates that there's an agreement between the two as it is. In a sense, and this, I hope this isn't a wrong interpretation, but you almost have a property owner then enforcing the TUP locally on site. If there is an issue between, if the entity obtaining the TUP is not taking care of the subject or the subject site, then the owner has the ability, I'm assuming under his right with their contract, to terminate that at any time. And their would remove the need for the TUP, and he could have that removed. I don't know, I'm not privy to how that negotiation works with, I know that certain, bin purveyors have, exclusive with, say, like Walgreens. I'm sure there's some kind of agreement as to how that works, and that Walgreens retains the site as the property owner to be able to terminate that relationship. I'm not sure we want to get into that. I think that's a private party matter. I think more importantly, we have the tools in place with this ordinance to be able to deal with the TUP and through the code compliance, address ownership if need be.
I definitely agree with what you're saying. I'm wondering if it's, I'm kind of playing both sides on it, but I don't want to get stuck in the weeds too much. I support this. I would like to see the notarized property owner or authorized agent inserted in one.
Just with
That's me.
respect, Madam Chair, Commissioner, we've talked a lot about that. We looked at not only ordinances throughout the valley, but we looked at them nationwide. And I can tell you that in all the ordinances, and obviously I didn't look at every single one of them, I found one ordinance that had the notarization requirement, and I didn't find any ordinance that had that language in it, the self-protecting from the ownership standpoint. So there were certainly, I would say, I would characterize that we are probably a little more restrictive in some of the provisions that we've included here, certainly with the number of bins that can be located in certain places. But I would characterize it and say that it's fair, it's consistent across the board, but it doesn't go quite to some of the same extremes as others do. Namely, the Phoenix zoning ordinance, the only one I found that had the owner authorization, notarization requirement. So I think that, in our effort to, again, I said at the last meeting, we didn't want to exclude anyone. We didn't want to make it impossible to do business here. We just wanted to create an even set of standards that we could apply equitably across the board. We believe that based on our current systems that the owner authorization or legal representative is sufficient to do that.
And,
Just Madam
Just-
Chair, just a comment.
Just one moment. Commissioner Loper, you finished? It doesn't
Yeah,
look like
I
he
guess
is.
maybe it's a personal preference. I think that, I personally like the notarized statement, but that's me. We'll see how it goes. But I think otherwise you guys have done an outstanding job, and clearly you've got good representation from different segments of it. So hats off to you for bringing a good ordinance forward. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Spraker?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a thought relative to what Commissioner Loper is talking about and the authorization. It just seems to me that we kill ourselves with regulation, and that's one more, another signature that we have to have. And if whoever's got the box out there, or got the store out there, or not supposed to be parking cars overnight at the gas stations being converted into an auto repair, you know, you just can't regulate everything. We have to go back and say that the entrepreneur, has to have some sort of responsibility. And if in fact he signs somebody else's signature and the box isn't being maintained or whatever's going on, then the city's reserved to itself the right to pull the box and, if necessary, keep the contents if there's anything worthwhile to the city. In fact, it would be my preference if it could be had, but I do believe in certain amounts of regulation. The least regulation is the less costly regulation to the city, to enforcement in every respect. And I believe so much regulation comes along, this is a speech, sorry about that, but what we tend to do is to stifle the entrepreneur and the ideas that they come up with. It seems to be that government is to stop the entrepreneur, and that ought not to be the case of government. So much for my speech. Thank you, Mr. Loper.
I actually agree with you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lewis?
He's deferring to me.
Oh,
She's been waiting.
Commissioner Strickland?
Okay, thank you. I actually have a few comments. First of all, as far as regulate, I'm in business and I am regulated all over the place. And unfortunately, our regulations have to go to the lowest common denominator. And so yes, the people that are making messes of the bins are the ones we are trying to regulate. And that is unfortunate, but it is true in almost every profession. So having stood on my little soapbox, I will now move on. I believe that some sort of notarization should be done. I'm not sure how staff or whoever the clerk is at the front is actually going to know that that is a signature of somebody that is authorized to make that. So in an example, someone goes into a store and a manager says, oh yeah, you can put it out there, and they sign the piece of paper. When it goes to the clerk, how is that clerk really going to know that it is somebody that is authorized to do that? And that's where my concern is with that. And as far as the other comment, which, let's see, the one that you were talking about that talks about that the owner has the right to get the bins removed. Again, my other concern with that is, as a landowner, I don't want the bin purveyor to then say, well, the city gave me this authorization. And I think that's where the issue is. You know, which is going to come first? And yes, the owner of the property would have the right to have the bin removed, but is there going to be some major issues coming into play with the fact that, you know, well, I got a city permit, so which takes, and I think that was the question to you, which would take precedence, the right of the owner or the fact that the city gave them a permit? And I think that that's a little cloudy area. That's my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Lewis?
Madam Chair, thank you. That was one of my questions. I was wondering if you guys could respond to that at all. I had the same question, the same concern about that. And maybe it does come from the city attorney. If I'm the landowner and I don't want that person to have that bin, we have a falling out, and that person has the permit to have that bin on the property, but I want them off, who trumps who?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Lewis, so the property owner has the right to deal with the property, including whatever action, even if it were to violate the permit in essence, since there'd be the permitted right. That might lead to a private dispute between the bin owner or the bin holder and the permit holder, in essence, and the property owner, that the property owner would have to deal with separately. But nothing in the permit would limit the property owner's right to take the bins away.
Thank you.
Thank you. That really clarifies.
Yeah, sorry if I didn't make
But
it clear earlier.
I wanted to make a comment too. You know, obviously, these donation bins serve a very useful purpose for donations for nonprofits, and as I learned tonight, some of the donations for the recycle, I assume, are for profits, but regardless, it's good for the community when we're recycling garments and that sort of thing, the textile industry, so that's a great thing. That being said, the fact that I do believe that they serve a useful purpose in our community, what's happened over the years with the lack of regulation is it's created blight in our neighborhoods. I mean, you can't deny that. Nobody can deny that. All you have to do is drive around these bins and you can see that. So I'm very happy that the city staff has taken this on. I think your draft proposal that you're coming up with this amendment is going to have enough teeth that we're going to be able to go out and eliminate a lot of these problems, probably within the first 6 months of the rollout period. Your requirements in there for not allowing them to take over parking spaces has always been an issue with me. You go in there and there's bins there where you could be parking, but you can't now. Not allowing them to be on public rights of way, access, like we saw the one picture there sitting there. Those kinds of things, not being able to bundle them, have 6, 7 of them like we saw in that one photograph, restricting the number of them. I think all of those things you've covered in this draft are excellent. And I think if we're able to enforce it, if the language in there has enough teeth in there to where our enforcement people will be able to go out and actually do it, I think this is a great thing. And I know you guys have put a lot of work into this. My hat's off to you. I think it's an exceptional product you've come up with. And I just want to say thank you for that.
Other comments? Commissioner Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry about that. Just to concur with what I've heard here today, I think it's a solid ordinance. I think a wise man, maybe it was a wise woman, maybe more likely a wise woman, who said perfect is the enemy of good. I'm a believer in giving an ordinance a chance to work and then working out the kinks later, certainly. That said, I think the notarization piece, I also feel pretty strongly about that as well. I would love to see that language included. I think we've had some agreement here on this commission for that. So that was the only thing I'd add. I really feel that that's something that we need. That would give us the assurance that we need, that we're dealing with an authorized agent versus, as my fellow commissioner said, a cashier or somebody that's not authorized to make that decision and does so, and then it creates some issues for us or somebody else down the road. So that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Other comments? I used to have 1 or 2 or 3. So the only penalty I see is if I'm not in compliance, then the ban gets removed. That's the only penalty, right? And my ban, if I have 10 bans around the city, you only remove the ban while I'm out of compliance. Is that
Madam
correct?
Chair, that is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you. And I'm assuming in most cases, because you've done a study of this, I'm assuming in most cases, if I'm out of compliance with one ban, I am probably out of compliance with all my bans.
Madam Chair, I don't have any concrete evidence to
I'm
support
sure you
that,
do.
but, you know, I think it's, you know, a pretty reasonable expectation. You know, and the one thing that I would just point out is and I said this in the study session a couple of weeks ago. This is my second go-around with donation bins. I was part of the one that we did in Goodyear. You know, and again, now Goodyear's ordinance is much less restrictive than the one you have before you this evening. You know, and what we found was that by enabling a process, the folks that wanted to play by the rules stayed and played by the rules. Everybody else got up and went where there were no more regulations. You know, so I think it's been a good, healthy discussion this evening. I think that, you know, certainly there have been some illustrative points that have been brought up, and we'll take those into consideration as we move forward this. And I would just like to say, as the individual who's put a lot of time and effort into this thing to get to where we are right now, I appreciate, you know, the attention to detail on this that y'all have put into it as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I do want to commend the staff for their good work, and I'll, you know, it's very seldom that we have a piece of languages to come up, and everyone is supporting it at some level. You don't see that very often. So it tells me that you've done your job and you've done it well, and I appreciate that. So thank you. Although I am tired of seeing these bins now. In fact, I'm convinced, Mr. Williams, that you have put some in places that I go.
Madam Chair, as a city employee, I would have had to divulge that as a second source of income, and I've had no discussion with Chris Hawkes regarding that.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
But, yes,
I'm sorry.
okay.
May- I just wanted to get one point of clarification I forgot. We had a lot of good points raised this evening by some of the speakers, and I just wanted to, one of them that was brought up, I believe, by the gentleman from the textile recycling, was the possibility if I have 10 or 15 bins out there and one of them is not in compliance, can I lose my license for all of them? If that's correct, that doesn't seem right to me. It seems to me that the license ought to not be in jeopardy, but perhaps the permit for that particular bin that's in violation.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, so I'm looking at item 13 in our ordinance. So it says, drop-off boxes not located or maintained in compliance with this article shall be subject to revocation of the business license. That does seem pretty harsh, particularly if one box is, inappropriately cited, do you revoke the whole license for the entire city? I wonder if the word subject allows some latitude to, if this is a recurring issue and it's chronic, does that enable the city then to make a discretionary decision on whether they want to go through that action?
And I've seen similar language in other things too, and I understand that kind of leaves us a little bit of cushion there. It just seems a little harsh sometimes if you're on the other end of that one there. But I can understand that. If I'm the employer and I have the license and I have 5 people running the boxes and one's a rogue employee, he's not doing his job, that my license can be in jeopardy. I need to deal with that employee.
Commissioner Lewis and members of the commission, I wonder if one change might be appropriate. Instead of shall be subject, may be subject. I wonder if that maybe is better worded in that context.
That leaves a little more latitude. I think that would be a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Commissioner Sprinker?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wouldn't want to put the city in competition with free enterprise. I've already made my speech about that, but my thought was this. The gentleman from the textile recycling company indicated that, I think I took a note on it, that roughly out of the 70 pounds of throwaways each year in terms of textiles that we as individuals do on an average, I presume, only about 10% of that, or 7 pounds of that, goes for recycling. Well, inasmuch as the city operates once a week with recycling bins, maybe there should be some advocacy to the population of the city saying, hey, if you got throwaway clothes or textiles, use the textile bin, because I frankly have never even thought about that. Usually it goes, to somebody else or in the trash. But anyway, just an observation.
Thank you. Any others? I'm sorry, do you have one more, Commissioner Loper? Okay, then I would like a motion, and I am going to ask you, Commissioner Loper, to put it.
All right, I'll attempt to do this, and if it sounds too squirrely, then maybe we need to come back with clearer language. So, my motion is to recommend to the City Council approval of case TA 14-0001 as proposed by staff with the following additions. Under 14-3-14 subsection 1, next to the last sentence, starts pursuant to Article 14-38 and upon receipt of the letter A, written, notarized letter of, and then it can continue. And then in place of the word by, or from, I guess I'm trying to be consistent with the two, so it would read, pursuant to Article 14-38 and upon receipt of a written, notarized letter of authorization from the property owner or authorized agent, for one. Okay. And then it it sounded like we had something under 13, subsection 13. In the second sentence, instead of the word shall, it'll just be may. Does that seem to make everybody good? All right, and that's my motion.
Thank you. Could I have a second?
Madam Chair?
Yes?
I see these two changes that are being proposed by Commissioner Loper as being two independent, one independent of the other, and that they can't be made on one vote. I'm proposing that 14-3-14-1 be a standalone vote, and 14-3-14-13 be a vote that stands on its own. I guess that goes to the city attorney.
Let's all turn to the city
Yeah,
attorney.
that's a matter actually of the commission's prerogative. So Commissioner Loper made his motion, which someone could second, and you could proceed to vote on the two items combined. Or if you like Commissioner Spraker's idea, then he could he could ask Mr. Loper to amend his motion and do one at a time, which could be seconded and move forward. So it's really your prerogative now. Commissioner Loper's motion's on the table if someone wants to second it as is, or it could be amended before a second and move
I will second that motion.
And a second, Commissioner Loper's motion to address both issues at the same
That's
time.
correct.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Then we'll please vote. There are no lights. Okay, so, let's do it again. Please vote one more time. Thank you. No vote. Okay, let me just call the roll. Okay? Commissioner Loper? Yes. Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Commissioner Spranker? No. Commissioner Golden, yes. Commissioner Strickland?
Yes.
And Commissioner Lewis?
Yes.
The motion passes. Thank you. Now, folks in the audience, if you'd like to leave, we have one more item on our agenda. You're certainly welcome to do so at this time. Thank you. And thank you for your participation. Okay. Will the next item take long?
Well, our audience left us.
And we saved the best for last.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess the question is, do you need a break before we go on? Okay.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, I think what we intended on the next item, this is a no-action item. I think we wanted to give you an update on the open space
Right.
preservation. I think we last came to the commission, about 8 months ago or so? So we wanted to give you an update on where we are.
Oh, we're going to take a quick break.
I'm just getting the doors.
Okay. Oh. We're going to take a quick break. I'll call the meeting to order. Okay, the last item of business tonight is 10 Aura project update, and the staff will review and discuss the final draft Sonoran Preservation Program, and to seek comment, input, and direction on the findings, priorities, and recommendations. The goal of the program is to identify areas that merit special consideration and then attempt to strategically assemble them over time through acquisition, conservation, partnerships, and development cases into a meaningful network of connected open space for a variety of uses. And tonight, there'll be no action taken. So could I have a presentation from the staff?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, we saved the best for last, and I'm not quite sure, but every time I give this presentation, everybody leaves. No, we're pleased to come back before the commission. We were before you almost a year ago to give you an update on where we had, what we had come to. This has actually been about a 5-year process getting to this point. So it's a very major program for the city, and we're very pleased that we're finally getting to the point where we're ready to go to council and bring this to the citizens. We think it's going to be an incredible program that's really going to advance the city in many ways. We have some policy guidance that's we're following. City Council policy goal is to preserve our natural environment, and we have some of the best natural environment in the Phoenix metropolitan area. So it's a daunting task to undertake. We have some general plan goals that instruct us to promote a high level of environmental quality and a safe and healthy, enjoyable environment for Peoria residents, another very lofty goal. And then have environmentally sensitive and self-sustaining open space that preserves and enhances cultural resources. We have some regulations that are already in place, the Hillside Development Overlay District and the Desert Lands Conservation Ordinance, which are guiding principles at the moment. We've identified in our program mission that we want to identify ecologically and historically significant lands within the city, prioritize those open spaces for acquisition or protection, and in doing so provide an abundant, high-quality recreational opportunity for our citizens, and create an extensive open space network for future generations to enjoy. And so we've hired consultants to help us with this process, and very early on, you might remember, we had quite a bit of discussion on this about the model program that we were putting together that would help us make scientifically based decisions. I bring you an example here of one which really came to the forefront, and that's the heritage and cultural aspect. There were several that we looked at, 4 in particular, and this is one of the 4, which really brought to our attention that we have some very significant, sensitive historical and cultural sites within the city. And we want to place an emphasis on conservation rather than development in those areas because, as some people have pointed out, they're not making cultural sites anymore. They're disappearing, but we're not making them anymore. So we want to preserve those that we have within the city. So,
I was going to make a joke that, 100,000 years ago, they had drop boxes.
and now we're trying to preserve those. Yes, trash mounds, absolutely. They're the most scientifically relevant areas. Absolutely, you're right on target. So through this model and through our study, we've identified a unique model that we're actually applying to this process, and that's if you look up in the upper right corner, you'll see a little inset that shows you the traditional model that we followed, and that was we identify a park site and a cultural site and maybe some other significant areas. What the model has actually told us to do is to take a look at all of these and try to connect them with other open space areas and to make more of a district, more of a flow, if you will, with these resources. And it preserves not only the context, but preserves some of the habitat as well. So that's what we're trying to do. And in doing so, we're looking at some regulatory code changes. we'll probably be back before you at some point in the future with the same kind of debate you had tonight on language for the donation bins, but it'll be more directed to open space. We're going to look at cultural resources. We're going to look at edge treatments, wildlife corridors, and scenic areas. So you'll see some activity in those areas in terms of code changes. In terms of the Desert Lands Conservation Ordinance, which is a very good ordinance that the city has, we've identified one particular area is that we have some cultural resource protection provisions that are a little weak that we need to address, and we need to define the phases of investigation, the roles and responsibilities, who reviews the archaeological reports, processes of reporting standards. We need to define appropriate treatment for sensitive areas. Sometimes developers like to say, well, it's just this particular area, but as you identified, Commissioner Loper, some of the trash mounds that look like just little hills in the area are actually more important scientifically than the surface ruins. So we need to be able to identify what is the sensitive area and encourage development to avoid those sensitive areas. And so one of the ways that we see a possibility to do this, and there'll be more discussion on this, is the addition of an in-house or a contract professional archaeologist that can help staff when development comes in and says, our archaeologist says this. We have a city resource, if you will, that can advise us, is that actually the case, or do we need further study on this? One of the other things we're looking at in Phoenix has really done some remarkable work in this area of late, are edge treatments. Instead of having subdivisions that have straight lines for thousands of linear feet, maybe a block wall that goes up that separates the subdivision from the open space, we want to look at openings in that straight linear wall. We want to look at opportunities maybe for single-loaded streets that actually open up the open space into the community so that there's more of a free flow between what is the open space and what is the community. We find that where you have the subdivisions sequestered from the open space, there's a disconnect between the subdivision and the open space areas, and there's not an appreciation from the community. Where we have penetrations from the community into that open space, there's buy-in by the community, and they actually take ownership of the open space and treatment. So we find that that's a very important aspect that we want to address. We want to make sure that that these ordinances work better to define wildlife corridors and washes. The illustration B on the right is kind of the model that we're doing right now. What we want to get to is the model A on the left, which actually makes more of a corridor situation so that wildlife can move through these corridors, and we can get them off the streets, if you will, as they move through some of our desert communities and back into the washes where they really would rather be and belong. We also want to define better scenic areas. We're getting into development into areas now where we have quite a bit of hillside, foothills, if you will, and some really drop-dead gorgeous areas that we want to make sure that that we define what is scenic and what is worthy of preservation and conservation, so that our Peoria residents, not only in the area, living in the areas where these resources occur, but those that are living in the southern areas that maybe want to come up and visit these areas and enjoy them just as much as those that live in the area have that opportunity to do that and appreciate and actually learn and teach their kids the value of scenic areas in the environment. So what we've done is the preservation program and the model has given us 5 major areas. We initially started out thinking that we were just going to address the northern areas, but we've actually amended this program to address the entire city. And I think that is a goal that is defensible, and I think everybody in the city will appreciate. We've looked at the BLM areas north of State Route 74 as a resource, the West Peoria Hieroglyphic Mountain Foothills as a resource, the Ava Fria and the West Bank Terraces as a resource, the New River area as a resource, and we've discovered that there are remnant parcels within the southern part of the city that demonstrate our agricultural heritage that fall under open space just as well as mountain areas do. So we're looking at a holistic approach to the city. The program identifies Arizona State Lands, which own about a third of the area that we're looking at here, so they're a major player in the program. We're also looking at federal lands, which is also about a third in terms of ownership. So we've got a balanced ownership between federal, state, and private ownership. We're also going to recommend an expansion of our planning area. We're probably going to go at least 2 miles north of our northernmost boundary, a little bit further into Yavapai County. And the reason why we want to do this is to incorporate Hell's Canyon Wilderness Area and also Castle Hot Springs Resort, which we all recognize as a tremendous historic resource. And we want to make sure that as it goes forward with development, that there's the proper protections in place, that it just doesn't get bulldozed overnight and turned into something quite different than what it is. So we're very specific about moving our planning area to the north so that we can have a seat at the table, if you will, with the state lands and BLM and other resources out there. So we've divided the program into 3 focus areas. Our primary focus areas, you might look at it as a 0 to 5 year window of opportunity. These are parcels that are probably the most significant in terms of endangerment from development. And so we want to address those first before we lose them. And just to give you an example of a focus area of this nature, we've got an area listed here kind of centered around the Calderwood Butte area, which has very significant historic and cultural values. These are areas that are owned by BLM and Arizona State Land and private holdings, and they are full of cultural resources. And they would be difficult for any developer to come in to deal with. I mean difficult from an expense standpoint, because they would have to mitigate these. Just to give you a flavor of what's out there, we have Hohokam resources, we have historic resources, we have the Marionette Canal, which is historic, the Beardsley Canal, several surface ruins, and so it is really a very significant area for the city. And there are thoughts here with the Parks Department and other divisions to really turn this into an educational opportunity where we can actually create a district and a cultural resource where we could bring kids for a number of decades into these areas and teach them about the historic and cultural resources that the city has. And I think over time, when we think of significant cultural sites in the Phoenix metropolitan area, Pueblo Grande in the city of Phoenix comes to mind, Mesa Grande in the East Valley comes to mind. I see no reason why this couldn't be a destination just equally as important as those cultural resources in the valley, if not more, if we do it right. Then we have secondary focus areas, and you might look at this as a 5 to 10 year. Now, the 5 to 10 year and the 0 to 5, that's just conjecture. It could be shorter, longer, whatever it is. But just to give you kind of a flavor of what we're thinking of in terms of planning. An example of this would be the area north of State Route 74, which is primarily BLM, although it does have some state land and some private land. This is primarily your natural and scenic and recreational areas. And we're doing some very innovative work with the BLM right now, putting together an MOU, which the BLM sees as a model for them for cooperative agreements between the federal agency and metropolitan urban areas. So we're doing a little bit of ground breaking work here with the BLM, and we're very encouraged by that. And I think the things that are going to come out of that are going to be good for recreational and scenic values for the city. Just to give you a flavor, now that we're talking about the secondary focus areas, it's not just flat land up there, it's pretty severe topography, so it would be a challenge for anybody to develop it in terms of infrastructure. And then we have what we're calling areas of interest, and these are maybe 10 years to 15 years out. They're not as quite the priority isn't as imminent in terms of development, and so we're looking at these lands as areas that we could do further study on if we need to, and define the boundaries. And to give you an idea, the west planning area is a good example of that. These are more natural habitat areas and do have some recreational value. We probably need to look at the boundaries of these a little bit more and decide what is significant and what is important. For example, a lot of these areas are drainage areas. There are some mountain areas. What makes sense to preserve and what makes sense to develop? That's going to be the question guiding these areas. Certainly, they're all going to have significant challenges in terms of infrastructure and development. So what are our next steps? Well, right now, we're right dead center. We're at the Planning and Zoning Commission. Back to you folks. And in another week, we're going to be before the Parks and Recreation Board to do this very same update to them. And then in January, we're hoping to be before council to get their input and hopefully adoption of the master plan and start writing checks. So I'll entertain any questions you have now.
Thank you. Anyone on the, yeah, Commissioner Loper?
I'm sorry, we're all tired. So is this our only stab at it before it goes to council?
Members of the commission, Commissioner Loper. No, tonight is intended to be just another informational item. We intend to come back to the commission. And just to speak to one of the slides, it mentioned a January date with the council. That's probably going to be pushed back a little bit. We have a new council coming in. We're, of course, going to need to go in front of them and brief them on what the nature of the ordinance, and then come back for action. So we're going to be coming back to the commission. I don't know if we have a date set for that. Is that December?
And that's okay. I just didn't know if I need to
No,
put it all
no.
out or
No, we wanted
which
to-
nobody is going to be happy about.
Right. No.
So, all right. Well, a couple things. One, or actually a few things. One, I commend the city for doing this. Putting this together to begin with at a time when the market was going crazy was really, really good to be out in front of that. And I think it's important to do that now to follow that up when housing's down and development's down, so you can gear up towards it. Because what we found with communities like Pistancia and West Wing to some extent, and some of those in Phoenix off 67th, is that development can appreciate and thrive with these ordinances in place because it's a value-added proposition for them. And they see it as a way to sort of exclusivity. So I like that. And so again, I commend you for that. Two things. One, and not for tonight, but when you come back, talk about your process today for the archaeologists, because my familiarity with how SHPO's involved may be different than what you're doing. So I'd want to know before we kind of put the city on the hook to either have to contract with an archaeologist or bring somebody on board, where the gap is in that existing relationship of SHPO reviewing the existing archaeological reports. And the second thing is, and you probably already are, but involve Game and Fish a little bit in this, because they have no money and they want everybody to do everything for them. But be that as it may, they really have some great concepts and ideas with the wildlife corridor that they're doing in other remote areas of the state. So that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going this way.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I got reprimanded.
She always looks left first. Every time there's, any comments, we're always the last ones.
You really are.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for another great presentation. This is near and dear to me. And I know last time when we got the presentation, I made a comment that I'm going to make similarly again tonight. that I hope that as we move forward with this as a city, that we reach out to the community, that we reach out to people who have an interest in this, especially the areas of the cultural heritage and the preservation and those sorts of things. I hope that we will reach out to the state universities, some of the private universities, some of the foundations out there. There are philanthropic organizations out there that look for projects just like this. And
Absolutely.
It really struck with me when you said to make this a destination for school children and for education and that sort of thing. What a great opportunity for some of our state universities to get involved in this right at the bottom, at the ground level of this. We've got a plan in place that we're putting in place right now. We've got a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. Let's reach out and bring some of these people and get them on board and create some teams to help us achieve what we want to do here. Congratulations and a great job, though. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I too want to say that I applaud this. I think the more we can preserve some of these open spaces, it's going to make Peoria more enticing for visitors and for people to come and live. So I think this is wonderful. So I applaud you.
Thank you. I just have a few comments. And one of mine is that I guess I always get very nervous about preserving the Native American culture. Too often when we identify where we think people might find hieroglyphics, so they might find something, people tend to go out there and look and take it home with them. And I'm nervous about that we're identifying sort of high areas where we think there might be some cultural significance, and yet we're not really at a stage where we can protect it. So, and I agree with you on the universities. I think they're wonderful in going out. You know, every graduate student wants a project, and I know when I was with BLM, we did a lot of partnerships with the universities because they have the manpower to go out and walk the area and look for T&E and look for, you know, cultural significance, where we didn't always have that time. So it's a great summer project for somebody, or maybe in Arizona, it's a great winter project for somebody. So anyway, I thank you. It's a great, this kind of land means a great deal to me, and I'm just thrilled that you're taking a good look at it and preserving it. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A thought is that, you know, you've got we have a fantastic opportunity here, and echoing what everyone else has said, I'd like to see for the next presentation, or maybe the next people would do, would be where the city's general plan fits over what you're planning on doing here, so you can talk about how the city would potentially could expand, where it could expand, how you might have, here we're going to have higher density, here lower density, here suburban ranches, or whatever you want to be, so that there's a perspective from not only the preservation side, but how the preservation side is impacted by the development side. Because when you go with this preservation, the developers are going to be sitting out here in mass, and they're going to say, you know, I can sell a slot over here for $2.5 million, and you're going to, because there's a pile of Indian bones over there, you're going to, whatever. So I think that those two maybe superimposed or side-by-side presentations would say we're trying to take this into consideration along with preservation. Just a thought.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Spraker, we actually, part of the program, we actually did look at that because we realized that, you know, private landholders have a right to develop their land. So as you know, some of the graphics that Jeff showed some of the PAD areas, PCDs that's already entitled that, you know, we expect to get some development entitlement. So we sort of didn't exclude them, but we were respectful of what they were doing there. And we've had these conversations, as you indicated, even with State Land Department, because if you look at our general plan map and then some of the information that we now have about some of their lands, there is some overlap and some questions about can we move some density away from some areas that we think are highly sensitive. So we have started those conversations. And to go back to Commissioner Loper's questions,
the next bite at the apple will be, this is the groundwork for an overall program that the council will adopt. It gives us sort of the stepping stones coming back. So any regulatory changes would come back as full text amendments. As Jeff talked about, the expansion of the planning area north and more into Yavapai County, that actually would require major general plan amendments, so that would go through the full vetting cycle. So, what we're trying to do here is just provide the recommendations that hopefully council agrees with and moves forward. Obviously, one of the biggest challenges with the program overall is funding right now. Chuck mentioned, starting to write checks. Well, we have a small bank account. We've identified a very big need. So that's one of the things that we're, bringing forward with this program, saying we can go so far with regulatory changes that we can do with this board and commission, but we can only go so far. At some point, we need to, come with a big checkbook. And some of the stuff that's innovative, to work with them, with the Bureau of Land Management and the Memorandum of Understanding, it's unique. What they're doing is coming down to a municipal level. They usually only deal with state and counties. So this is something that's unique. Jeff alluded to that, but it's setting the groundwork for something they could use around the nation if we can bring this to fruition. So we're excited about that. So, sorry.
Commissioner Nelson? Oh, I was, anything?
Just great work. Just to echo what's been said, anytime we can preserve land like this, it's only in the state one time. When you build something on it, it's never the same. So I applaud you for doing that. One quick question, would the preservation piece, you're going to sense a little bias from me here because I'm into riding dirt bikes. So are OHV trails part of this? Would they be part of, is that a separate thing altogether? Would that be integrated into a preservation plan?
Well, it is in the sense that we have a Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails Master Plan that's in place right now, and they recognize the major trail systems throughout the city, and the whole that really set part of the precedence for the Open Space Plan. I mean, we set our trails, which pretty much follow our river corridors and our major arterials, but the idea was to create a recreational connectivity between parks and destinations and the yet to be defined open space. Now that we've gotten to the point where we've defined the open space, now we're going to take probably a little closer look at when major communities come into the city for development. Where are your trails? Where are your open space? How are you connecting your trails with your open space with other trails and open space that are bordering you, so that we can create a full citywide comprehensive system. Maybe you won't be able to walk from Northern all the way up to State Route 74, but you should be able to get a pretty good shot at it. I mean, that's really the goal that we want to get to, so that whether you're biking, walking, when I first came on board here, somebody mentioned to me that the CAP Canal is a national trail that extends all the way from the California border all the way down to Tucson, and I thought, who in their right mind is going to hike that trail? And how long would it take them? But if it's there and you want to do it, you should be able to do it. And that's been kind of the guiding principle that we've had here at the city, is let's look at how we can make this connectivity. What can we do with our river corridors? What can we do with our arterials? What can we do with HOA trails, mountain trails, anything that's in the mix, and make sure that they actually interface with each other and connect, so a child can get from home to school, to the library, to open space, and not have to, go out with the traffic and take the risk of being hurt. So yeah, HOA trails are going to be a part of it, although they're private.
Not HOA,
OHV.
Highway vehicle.
Oh, OHV. Yeah, that is, when we did our public open space, or our public process, we had, was it 4 open houses, 3 or 4? Somehow it got out to the OHV community that we were going to close down the area that's known as the Boulders up off north of State Route 74. And we were jam-packed at every meeting with OHV aficionados. I learned more about OHV needs and operations than I thought I'd ever want to. But one thing I discovered, and we all discovered through that process, is that and they respect the environment, and they want to preserve what they're doing. And so they have put in place a self-governing set of standards that we have recognized as being a model for how we want to look at open space activities, recreational activities. For instance, recreational shooting, for example, could benefit greatly from the programs that the OHVers have put in place to self-monitor their areas. So we're looking at groups who have a vested interest in a type of recreation, be it boaters, shooters, target shooters, hikers, OHV, RC, radio-controlled aficionados, mountain bikers, you name it, whatever it is. We want to embrace and work with those organizations to self-govern the recreational areas that are important to them and help them be successful and preserve the environment. We really believe that those that utilize these areas really want to make sure that that what they do doesn't destroy what they're trying to do, that it's really preserved for other people as well. There's a recognition that we've come to learn for that, and so we want to work with these groups. So yes, absolutely, we're going to be working with OHV
I appreciate
folks.
that. It sounds like we're getting to Commissioner Lewis's point. If we can involve clubs and enthusiasts, that's going to be a key part of the success of this. So
Yeah.
thank you, great
and,
work.
And they're going to be our biggest supporters, I think, as time goes on. As this program develops, we're really going to get a lot of support from those folks. So they're important stakeholders.
Yeah, as Jeff talked about, again, one of the things that we sort of, since starting the program, we sort of did a philosophical shift after those public meetings because we were thinking about open space preservation, but then we really started thinking after we've got the feedback from the public and the uses that they're using it for respectfully up there, that really, we're trying to provide a program that provides also recreational opportunities for people in natural open spaces. So the OHVers are a great, as Jeff talked about, it's a great organization as police that area. The BLM actually manages a lot of that. They actually have someone on their staff here locally does travel management planning in that area, including with state land department. So we learned that is actually something respectful. In some ways, this is the only way you can get up to some of these places is with an OHV. You'd be hiking for a day or so to get up to this vantage point actually north of State Road 74. So the program is actually holistic in the fact that it includes those types of activities. We're not just saying, let's preserve open space, which we're trying to do, but just for the fact of open space, we're trying to make something that's actually an amenity for the city also.
And truthfully, the challenge is protecting the OHV users from the recreational shooters. Yes, and yes, and that's one of the aspects that the BLM is very interested in working with the city for, because we're saying, if we can designate, designate's not the right word, but if we could create areas of activity centers for different recreational types, then we'll have a successful recreation program and manage the environment at the same time.
Well, if you can get off-road vehicle people and the hikers together and all agree to the same plan, you let me know. I love them both, but they have very, very different needs.
Different needs.
Solitude and an engine don't seem to match.
Yeah.
So, and they both have absolute rights to use that land.
But the beauty of what we have here in the city is that there's enough area that we could designate the quiet area where you just want to go up and watch a sunset and maybe eat a sandwich and enjoy nature and watch the eagles soar over the lake. And we have other areas that are just perfect, drainage areas that are perfect for OHV, areas that are kind of secluded that might be good for target shooters. I mean, it's really a matter of looking at the resources that we have and saying, this makes sense for you to be here.
I used to talk like that. Okay, Commissioner Loper, do you have anything else to add?
The only other thing is, I echo what he said about trying to, because those trail systems, I always hate when somebody comes in with a swath and says, oh, this is now a protected area. People used to ride bikes or hike or whatever, now suddenly excluded from an area, and it's like, well, really, what are we saving it for? If I can't ever see it or get to it, what good is it really doing for a resource? And the other thing, kind of echoing what was said earlier about looking at development with this, and maybe we already do it or not, you don't have to get into a lot of detail, but, transfer of development rights, density transfers, getting somebody, I know you functionally already do it, but, the best way to preserve that hillside when it's privately owned is tell the developer, you know what, that 4 dwelling units per acre you could have put there, we'll let you do 8 here, you protect that mountain. They'll eat that all day because they don't have to build that expensive infrastructure and we get our mountain. So-
Let me share with you a success story. We, very early in this process, maybe a couple of years ago, we had a developer come to us, private, 160 acres, in which we knew there was a significant surface ruin, Hohokam surface ruin on it, about 30 acres worth. And he wanted to start development on that area and mitigate the site and bring an archaeologist in, which is his right. Bring an archaeologist in, do the study, much like they did at Terra del Rio, and then clear the site. And we said, we really, really, really don't want to lose those ruins. Could we give you higher density on the northern part of your property if you would give us a donation of the site? And we worked it out. That's exactly what the specific plan now states, is that they're on hook to give us the surface ruins, and they're going to get higher density in other parts of there, and everybody's happy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Good presentation. Let's see, call to the public? I guess there's no public, so we could move on from that. Reports from the staff.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, just a few things. Jeff gave a really good presentation on open space. I think you saw the passion that he has for open space. He's been instrumental in putting the open space plan together for us. Unfortunately, this is going to be his last Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. He is retiring as of, December 1st or so. But no doubt that, Jeff's been with the city for about 12 years, the last, 5 years with the planning department. But I have no doubt that he's going to be alongside with us as the open space plan moves forward, and I'm sure we'll see him in future years ahead, probably in the audience, as one of our supporters though, right, Jeff?
Is that a new position for the archaeologist?
And then I was going to introduce some new staff, but they seem to have moved on, so we'll save that for our next meeting. And then the last item I wanted to bring up is Steve Berg, of course, is one of our assistant city attorneys. He's still with the city. He's not going anywhere, but we do have another city attorney that's going to be working specifically with the planning department and some of the development issues. And his name is William Block, and I believe he'll be at our next Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. He's got experience in the city of Phoenix and so forth. So.
Zoning attorney, isn't he? Or hasn't he been?
He's worked for the city of Phoenix. Okay. As, basically the lawyer for their planning department or overseer.
And then finally, our next meeting, do we have that scheduled yet? Or?
We don't have yet one.
Okay.
We haven't done the agenda yet for the 18th.
We haven't done the agenda yet. We may or may not have a meeting in December.
So no meeting, the first meeting in December is canceled.
First meeting in December is canceled, so thanks. So happy Thanksgiving, though.
Go Devils.
And go Devils.
Okay, any reports from Planning and Zoning Commissioners? All right, then I am going to adjourn this meeting.